Hello again, friends! And you are our friends, and welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru right here. I don't know what kind of energy I have here at the top of the show. It started one way and it quickly went downhill, but we're going to pick things up for a fun and exciting episode. This episode was promised to someone that it would be a lot of fun. I'm your host, the great Brian Last, and here he is, Mr. Fun himself, the leader of the cult of Cornette, Mr. Jim Cornette.
What's a hubbub, bub? What's the plan, Stan? What's happening, Captain? You're all over the place here. You're all over the page. If you were one of those
Head out the back,
lie
Jack.
detector charts, you'd be just speaking with a forked tongue, you lizard person, you.
You and the lizard people, this has become some kind of weird obsession with you.
I'm telling you, there may be something to this. I think there is now to this QAnon thing, I'm saying if you walk down the streets of America now, if you go up to 42% of the people you see and just punch them in the face, their face will shatter and it will fall away, and underneath will be the reptilian creature that battled Captain Kirk on the planet on Star Trek. A big reptilian crocodilosaurus, or what would it be? A crocodilosaurus?
Yeah, it's a croc of something.
Or an alligator. A crocosaurus.
A crocosaurus.
That's what it is. It's the crocosaurus.
The skin breaks off. What is the skin made out of? The skin that covers the lizard.
You've never seen that in the movies? The movies that have foretold all these things?
So you believe that...
And the Twilight Zone, when you punch and House of Wax. And when you punch the heel in the face, and the face cracks, and they're either lizard people or they're disfigured underneath.
Why stop there? What about Freddy Krueger?
Well, there you go.
Friday the 13th.
If you go under these masks or these makeup jobs or this false exterior, you got a lizard people. I'm one of the believers now.
That's crazy. What do you think that they live?
I think they do.
What do you think of the film They Live?
Oh, the film. I thought you meant the concept. Yeah, I think, if we had those glasses, boy, I'll tell you, a lot more people in the wrestling business would probably be unpopular. But that was a fine turn, I thought, of thespianism by Roddy Piper in They Live.
I agree, his second best movie. But of course, we're here today to talk about wrestling. We have questions that you'll be answering.
Well, before we get to the wrestling,
yeah,
I got to be honest with you. This is old news, but if you haven't heard it, it's news to you, right? And I'd written myself a note a few weeks ago, and somehow it got misfiled. Let's say it's clearly written here on the back of a used manila envelope in black Sharpie. In my shorthand. I don't know how I missed it. It went to the out bin instead of the in bin. And we haven't talked about it yet, but I saw something on the news that I wanted to comment on because it tied into, remember when we talked about on one of the programs here that we do constantly about the Airbnbs? You remember this?
I do. I told you I was a shareholder. I explained the concept to you briefly.
The share. I'd like to hold one of your shares for about 2 minutes if it was made of lead and I was over the top of your skull. But nevertheless,
make me an offer.
the Airbnbs, I had raised the issue. Why would you want to be in someone else's house when you don't know anything about them or their social circle or people that might be going to visit them in the middle of the night? And conversely, why would you want someone else in your house, not knowing who they were affiliated with or what was going on with them, that they might wreak some kind of destructive havoc, right? I didn't know how either side of that equation was comfortable. And then I saw this on the news. Apparently this is shocking, but there was a shooting. That's not what the shocking part is, because there was a shooting. Those happen constantly. But it was at a house party at an Airbnb where someone had rented this Airbnb home. Apparently it was a sizable place, and one would think it was in a good neighborhood because it was a sizable enough place. And you know how many people they had at the house party at the Airbnb?
I have no idea. I did not see the story.
Take a wild guess. How many people would be at a party at somebody's house?
50 people.
200. 200 people somehow assemble at a party at somebody's fucking house. And it wasn't like that they were out in goddamn Sandy Fork, Delaware, and had a lot of room in the yard. It was the aerial shot. The police tape that had the place taped off didn't look like the yard was that big, okay? But they had 200 people in and around the environs of this house. And I don't know who rented it, but I bet you they didn't know that was going to take place. And some moron breaks out shooting at people, which, like I said, that's not the shocking part because that happens all the time because it's America. But 5 other people were injured. Brian, you know how they were injured?
They fell in the pool?
Well, you're close. I don't know where they landed, but it's the news story said that 5 people were injured jumping out of windows of this fucking house to get away from whatever apparently they couldn't make it. Not only the bathroom line was too long, but the line to the fucking stairs or the door was too long, so they jumped out the fucking window. 5 of them were injured doing that. And I made note of that because I just wanted...
The question is, 5 of them were injured doing that. Do they land one on top of each other?
It didn't comment on whether it was the same window. It could have been multiple windows in this complex.
Hey, it's Jerry. You too? Oh, yeah, I went out this window over here.
Oh, shit. Ben weighs 300 pounds. When's he got? Wait a minute. Hold on. Incoming.
Oh, it's Ben.
It's Ben. Oh, it's Bill. Bill's on Gorilla. Anyway, so I made note of that because I just wanted to make mention in a public forum, such as this podcast here that does reach quite a few members of the public and could be considered a forum. I want to make this, I know the more a man makes declarative statements, the more likely he is in hindsight to be judged in error, but I am going to make this declarative statement right now. This is a headline. This is a news story. This is a bit of gossip. This is something on TMZ, whatever you want to call this. This is not something you're ever going to hear in the immediate or distant future. Jim Cornette injured jumping out of a fucking window. I will never be in a position, I'm pretty confident, for the rest of my life where I'm going to have to or be tempted to jump out a fucking window. So I'm just making that blanket statement, right? Somebody can hold me to this if I'm in error in coming years.
I think you're selling yourself short. You could certainly be in a situation where you would have to jump out of a window.
I'm not jumping out of any fucking windows. Most of the windows I plan to be behind are my own here that I'm actually, I may jump off of something after I pay for these new windows that I'm getting here later on this year, but I'm going to be behind my own windows and here's this, and somebody's going to say, well, wise ass, at some point, sometime for the rest of your life, you're going to be in a fucking hotel. Well, those goddamn windows don't open. So if there's a fire, and that's another reason I don't like hotels. If you're in a fire in a fucking hotel, they say, oh, don't get on the elevator. Well, no shit, Sherlock. But everybody else is going to be using the fucking stairs. It's going to be crowded. I'm going to have to elbow my way past a wall of human flesh, popping women and children right and left, kneeing, kicking, scratching to be the first one out. Instead, I've got a window right there. I'm going to be at the fucking Hampton Inn. There's only 3 floors. I got a shot. But no, you'd need goddamn the fireman's tools and a contractor to give you an estimate on how to get that fucking window open. So What do you think, Brian? What are you going to be jumping out of?
I'm not jumping out of anything. I'm pretty happy right now. I'm also not renting out my place on Airbnb, nor am I renting someone else's place on Airbnb. Although if you do that as a shareholder, I say thank you. I don't understand.
What's your big housewarming party? You got room for 200, 250, maybe 300. 325 if you were pushing it, people out there, plus the yard.
I'm spreading out the housewarming over a good 18 months, you know. Random people are chosen to come at certain times.
Random people.
Well, randomly.
So are you like Bobby Eaton? You just walk in the convenience store and there's some poor shoeless guy sitting there and you walk in and buy him some stuff and invite him home to dinner?
Hey, they have an interesting story, you know.
Where his shoes went.
Where are his shoes?
Where are his shoes? If people are asking where are their action figures, there's a transition. If you feel the same way without your action figures that most people feel without their shoes, folks, stand by because you're going to be walking barefoot for another few weeks. No, I am going to praise the Featherbottom family here. Fanny and Felcher and Hotchkiss. I just want to draw a comparison. Brian, everybody that's been with us since last fall knows when the new website was launched last October, but before I hired the Featherbottoms and their speedy assembly system and the Featherbottoms ultra careful handling system, FUCH, the fuck system for short. Before that, I just had the new website. We opened up the 1st of October, and within 6 days, I had to close down. I had all I could handle. We'd sold buku of action figures, and I was slammed, and and it took me 10 weeks to get all that stuff out to the people. And we were crowding Christmas from the first week of October. I'll have you know that now with the Featherbottoms involved in this system, we went on sale with the new action figures on April 2nd. It's been 1 month. Over half of the individual orders and almost half of the action figures have been shipped out, and we've never closed. They've been able to keep up to date for all the other poor saps out there that didn't want a figure and would have to wait 3 months for a T-shirt. That doesn't happen anymore. But also, if you ordered a bloody variant or a couple of bloody variants, your stuff is all now either delivered or in the hands of the Featherbottoms. Almost all or all of the commentator play sets that have been ordered, just play sets, are either delivered or in the hands of the Featherbottoms. Over the next 2 weeks, we will be doing the combination one of each figure that those fine folks ordered, and within a week or two after that, we will be finished with the figures and multiple items, which does slow down the speedy assembly system somewhat. And that'll be 8 weeks instead of 10 weeks. We sold 700 or 800 more figures this time and never closed the store. That is an example of the only bottleneck is just me having to eat, sleep, and bathe every once a week or so, whether I need it or not, or elsewise we'd be doing better on the figures. And do these programs with you. And watch the bad wrestling so other people don't have to. I'm out here taking shots for the cult and delivering the figures. What more can they expect from one man? Featherbottoms are wonderful. And if you want something besides a figure at JimCornette.com, order with complete impunity, because you'll get your shit within a week or two. And there are still a few commentator play sets available if you want a figure as well. And that'll take a little longer. It's Derby week.
Oh, boy.
Here in Louisville, Kentucky. The most highly prized sporting event of the year. The greatest 2 minutes in sports. Everything's a Kentucky Derby Festival back this year. Everything with full capacity. Obviously, I'm not going to be involved in any of this, but it's after COVID. They've been doing everything, and it's going to fucking rain like pouring piss out of a boot this weekend.
Have you ever read Hunter Thompson's The Kentucky Derby is Decadent and Depraved?
I have not, but I would agree with his sentiment because we get to see the TV news every year about what people are doing out there. It's shameful. It's shameful. But this year they'll be soggy and muddy when they do it. But I'm not worried about the horses. The horses are waterproof. But a lot of old women's
okay.
Well, they are. You know, as a matter of fact, well, you know, the horse hide.
I never heard anyone say, hey, you know, horses are waterproof.
Well, they are. They stand right up to it. Those old fat gray-haired women's fucking derby hats, they're going to be soggy.
Well, listen, on the topic of Kentucky and Louisville, I guess, I think he is. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Any thoughts on the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial going on? Have you been following this at all?
I heard she pooped in his bed. Normally, you got a tip for that. She did it for free. I heard that he showed up looking like dressed like he was on the board of directors of a massage parlor while he was admitting that he tweeted the things he'd like to do to her burned, disfigured corpse. Am I sniffing the gist of the here? What the? No, I don't care about these people. That stuff has been put in front of me in headlines on brief news breaks and on Twitter, but I haven't been delving deeply into it. What does it have to do with Kentucky?
Well, Johnny Depp, isn't he from? That's why I said he's either from Kentucky or actually from Louisville.
I never ran into him. Is he? Look, Google that real quick.
Hold on.
I don't remember him in school or hanging out around the neighborhood.
Owensboro, Kentucky.
Oh, he's from Owensboro. No wonder. No wonder he's a weirdo, for heaven's sake.
How far away is Owensboro?
Oh, it's about 120 miles or 30 years. Pick your measure. No, and there's fine folks in Owensboro. The Owensboro Sports Center, a fine building that we could never fill up, no matter that even when Memphis was at its hottest, Owensboro never drew.
Well, we'll see if Johnny Depp ever draws people again.
They're fine people over there, except for that Depp asshole. The whole Depp family, I heard, was a bunch of heathens.
All right. Well, before you go any further and get sued by Johnny Depp, because that's what this is all about.
Was Uncle Pep.
Pep Depp?
Uncle Pep, he was the chief of the volunteer fire department. Pep Depp. He was a horrible, horrible fella. And then there was the police chief, Bino Depp. They were not liked in Owensboro. Not popular people.
Well, speaking of not popular, this episode of the Drive Thru continues, and
why did she shit in his bed?
The whole thing is such a disaster. I can't watch it, but I enjoy reading the newspaper articles about it, and they're just two assholes. He's a guy who became an actor at a young age, idolized Keith Richards and Hunter S. Thompson. He likes his drugs, he likes his drink. No one else has ever said he's violent. She, on the other hand, apparently has all sorts of issues with violence and is also out of hand. Apparently she was fucking Elon Musk behind his back. So that comes up in the trial. Imagine. Wait
a minute. How could she be? Oh, you mean she was giving it to Elon doggy style when you say she was fucking him behind his back?
I meant that's not what I meant. I meant she was having some side action, allegedly.
Oh, behind Johnny's back.
Behind Johnny's back.
Well, see, the way you said it, she's fucking Elon Musk behind his back, and that could only mean one thing unless one of them is a contortionist. And who is she that she'd be on the richest man in the world's radar? Why is she that desirable? Is she related to Jim Hurd? It's spelled differently, but if I was related to Jim Hurd, I'd change my name also. So I've never heard of Amber Heard.
All right, well.
Don't care.
Let's see how much you care about wrestling.
Sounds like a poopy person to me.
All right. Any other comments about this?
That's pretty much it.
Are you slapping these things? What are you hitting over there? I got an email here I can read later on if you run short of entertainment value, and that could happen at any time, considering your track record. Well, my entertainment value hasn't even started yet.
This is your program as you see fit to direct it. Far be it from me to try to take it off the rails.
Well, let me direct it in an actual direction. Now let's start with any modern wrestling. Let's get this out of the way so we can talk about all sorts of other fun topics.
Yeah.
But there was wrestling on Friday. Was any of it fun for you? There was two programs calling themselves wrestling.
Was it good for you? No, I faked every bit of it. So did they. Goddamn, I mean, you want to go in chronological order? I guess we could talk about SmackDown first. It debuted first on the East Coast, at least, the Eastern time zone. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get SmackDown out of the way. I say that all the time.
All right.
Hey, let's put Xfinity, Comcast's cable service over. They got a smart fast forward. You can just fly through shit, but still see everything that's happening. And it'll stop at the end of the commercial in case you want to stop, or if you just want to keep going.
Well, thank you very much for letting me know it. That's another thing that we have to blame the fine, feathered friends of ours at Spectrum that I've got. Not only are they raking me across the coals and violating me in a protuberant way every time I pay my bill, and I pay for twice the internet that I get because their idiot fucking henchmen can't figure out how to work their own equipment, and I'm constantly at the mercy of their substandard service and continue to suggest that anyone tie a string or a piece of wire to two soup cans instead of signing up with Spectrum to do anything but frustrate yourself and drive yourself into an early grave. But I appreciate you bringing up your fucking Xfinity and its smart fast forward.
I had no idea that was going to get you going like that. It's been a while since there was a rant about Spectrum.
Well, it just came up. So SmackDown on April the 29th, the long-awaited cage match showdown between Sami Zayn and Drew McIntyre. And they illustrated that the only way to do this was in a cage because for 3 weeks in a row, Sami Zayn, even in a lumberjack match, has just run away from Drew McIntyre. At some point, don't the fans have to say, you know what? If Drew takes so fucking long to beat this guy that he gets the opportunity to run away, then what the fuck's going on? But again, basically, they start a cage match. They go 2 or 3 minutes where Sammy's trying to run and get away and Drew's beating him up. That's the obvious thing that they should do. And then they go to the break in this cataclysmic cage match and come back, and there's another few minutes of standard action. And Drew will bow up a time or two, but Sammy will get back on him some kind of way in a heelish manner. And they're doing the over-the-top thing where Sammy keeps trying to climb out. And how, when it gets to the point where the guy's all the way over the side and halfway down, and the guy still in the cage has to reach over the top and grab him by a strand of hair, the crowd audio was going crazy. But it's all a bunch of fucking ventriloquists in the audience because they weren't moving, they weren't standing, they weren't waving their arms, they weren't turning their head. Live, you know, it looked like people, you had to hold a mirror up in front of their face to see if they were still alive, but they were going crazy sound-wise. Did you notice that?
I did notice that. WWE has a long history of doing it, especially on taped shows. Now they're doing it a lot on these live shows. Because everything's live. It does not sound natural at all.
It just it sounds like they've turned some extra microphones on at some point. But anyway, so Drew makes comeback. They fight on the top. Drew gets crotched. Sammy's over the top, but Drew catches him, gives him the superplex, does the nip up, hits Claymore kick, 1, 2, 3, good night, Sammy. It was fine for what it was and what it was supposed to be. There was nothing embarrassing. Nobody's work was bad, but again, it's an example of the entrances, and the falderall is more important to the WWF television product than the actual match. As soon as they get something started, they go to a break, they come back, they do the regular shit, and thank you and good night. And then the next segment, Happy Corbin with his Happy Talk set and bullshit with Mosh Pit we'll get about the same amount of time as a big main event grudge match between two supposed stars. What'd you think?
I was surprised they started with a cage match, and I was surprised that it was these two competitors in the cage match. I haven't been paying enough attention to realize they had a blood feud to the point where we're going to open up the nationally televised broadcast with a cage match.
Well, otherwise they were going to have to nail Sammy's balls to a step stool to get him to stay in one place.
What does that tell you about what WWE... The placement of the cage match, opening up the show, again, on national TV, on Fox Network, opening up with a cage match, what does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that's the only place that they can figure out to put it.
They didn't build to it. They didn't build to it throughout the show. Cage match tonight, cage match coming up later. It was just, if you happen to tune in, you caught a cage match.
That's their lead in, because they're on the Fox network. Their lead in is varied. It's local stations, primetime adjacencies. It's going to be Jeopardy or Wheel of, I don't know. No, Jeopardy's not tied in. Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, Seinfeld, whatever's hot in syndication. Apparently not The Big Bang Theory, as much as TBS is paying for it. But there's no set lead-in that they're trying to keep numbers from. They just, now I guess they're starting with action right out of the gate. And that's what they had. So again, there's nothing wrong with that, but okay, this is the first time that I've seen Shanky. By the way, we're skipping over the Happy Corbin stuff like everybody else does.
Hey, let me just say, this is the first time I've gotten to see Shanky. I've only gotten to hear about Shanky when you review him, and I thought it was one of your made-up nicknames until his graphic came on the screen. I thought it was just one of your names.
Well, I paid off the graphics guy, and Shanky. That's what I'm saying. I can't give him a nickname. I can't give him any name worse than that, and that's what I'm wondering. I think this is the first time we've actually seen him wrestle. He's supposedly 7'3". He's close enough they're calling him that, and he can move, and he looks like a human being facially. He's not that bad in the brief period of time we saw him with Ricochet. But Shanky, they named him Shanky. What and why is this guy not getting the opportunities that the other giants got? He's just been in limbo, whatever. And of course, the 150-pound fucking high school gymnast here beats him in minutes with a sunset flip. I know Almost has a little bit more physical presence. And good Lord, if they were trying to find somebody over 7 feet tall in AEW instead of Zippy Singh, maybe they could have stolen this guy away under cover of darkness. But you know what I've heard? The rumor is you can't teach somebody to be 7 feet tall. I've heard that said.
Why don't they start a promotion with all the 7 foot tall guys?
Because then they'd have no giants.
Dabo Kato, right? How tall was he?
He was.
And then there's 3 different guys 7 feet tall on the roster right now?
No, they fired him, didn't they?
Did they fire Dabo Kato?
Well, what's his name now?
Isn't he now Commander
Sneeze?
I don't know if that's a real name or a made-up name now because of you.
No, well, I can't really tell you then, can I? But I forgot about, okay, but yeah, we need to find some of these. How can all these 7-footers be so hard to find? And we got to talk about the releases, too, that they released this week in the WWF.
We will talk about the releases they released later on in the program, but let's get through a little bit more of this SmackDown.
All right, so Ricochet beat Shanky. Jesus Christ. Then it was the debut match of Ravishing Raquel Gonzalez Rodriguez against Kat Cardoza. Now, remember, Raquel Gonzalez looked somewhat like a Bond villainess this time last year. She had the cool kind of black pleather outfit, and she had a severe look to her, and she was bigger than all the rest of the girls in NXT and manhandled people and had the big shoulder spread and everything, and had kind of a cool, like a Diesel bodyguard type of thing going on. And then remember right before they moved her to the main roster, I said a couple months ago, I said, what the fuck have they done? It's like some soccer moms have given her a makeover. And she's cheerful and wearing girly makeup and cute. And now, guess what she's doing, Brian? Well, you don't have to guess. You saw it. She is the happiest girl in the whole USA. She's smiling ear to ear. Yeah. Her hair color's been softened. She's wearing all this colorful stuff. And now, because that is totally not her look, to me, the way that she comes off, it's like she's the homely girl trying to fit in with the cool girls in school instead of being her own girl. She's not as glamorous as some of these other enhanced folks on the roster. So why don't you let her look big and badass and woman handle people? But she's the happiest girl in the whole USA. Who did that, Mr. Music Expert? Who sang that hit?
That sounded terrible. I don't know.
Donna Fargo. You don't remember that? 1972, I'm going to say.
Was that Jackie's third wife?
No, it was his fourth. No, they weren't related. Look that up. When was Donna Fargo born?
I will look that up. I want to say, what was the name of the opponent in this match?
Kat Cardoza.
I thought she was the more impressive one of the two, actually.
She did look pretty. I was wondering if she was the mixed tag doubles partner of Matt Cardona. Matt Cardona and Kat Cardoza.
Because we've seen the former Raquel Gonzalez for a while. Now she's Raquel Rodriguez with a nice big graphic and fake crowd noise up the kazoo. Do you think Vince tells everyone to smile because he thinks it's important for everyone to just smile nonstop? Or does he tell everyone to smile because he forgets who everyone is? And like there's one specific person he wants to smile and he just can't remember who that is.
No, I think somehow he's fascinated with smiling now from everybody, at least the baby faces.
It was ridiculous on her entrance. She came out there. It's the smiling and then the move she kept doing where she turns around and flexes her back muscles and looks over her shoulder
and happy yet.
And then she smiles more. She's like Jade Cargill without any of the redeeming qualities in those early days.
So now, do we call her Smiling Raquel Gonzalez Rodriguez or Ravishing Raquel Gonzalez Rodriguez?
RGM. RGR. Excuse me. RGR.
Or it could be RRGR.
RRGR.
Or SRGR.
It doesn't have to call me Rodriguez.
It doesn't. The most important question is what year was Donna Fargo's hit?
Okay, hold on. Let's look up this Fargo.
The happiest girl in the whole USA. I'm saying 1970.
Why did I get a picture of Don Fargo in a wig? No, hold on.
Well, actually, I have that framed on my wall also. That was a rib in the 60s when they made Don up.
Okay, in 1972, one of her self-written and self-composed songs, The Happiest Girl in the Whole USA, was picked up by Dot Records.
Boom goes the dynamite. Off the top of my head, I'll have you know. Did you watch the contract signing between RK Bro and the Usos? And the question is that I derive from this, are there only two teams? Are there only two tag teams in this fucking company? I had more variety in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. I had 16 guys in the territory.
I was riding the fast forward button by this point, and I stopped it because I told you the next time you see RK Bro in a straight tag team match, watch the match. Let me know what you think. Like, evaluate it fairly. So I said, let me see what this is. And then I saw it was the contract signing. I was like, ugh. And I didn't even remember who they're feuding with. And then I saw it was the Usos. And I'm like, oh. Like, it's okay when they're out there with Roman Reigns standing behind them, but I don't want to see them wrestle anymore. They need to take a break for a while.
Well, this is the
same tag team. It's the same 4 tag teams always in rotation. These guys, the Street Profits, and whoever the fourth in the mix is, the Vikings.
The Vikings,
or it's usually some other jerk-off team. but it's just the same teams over and over and over again.
Here's the problem with the Usos, is if they had not been portrayed as Roman's flunkies, if since the dawn of, this whole thing, the bloodline, if they were just Roman's flunkies, they'd be great. Or if they weren't Roman's flunkies and they were tag team champions, I'd at least give them a shot. But it was illustrated here in this why you can't be both, because, well, first of all, it was standard jawing back and forth until Orton called one of the Usos a bitch, and then the Usos just jumped RK Bro and beat the shit out of them until RK Bro made a comeback and beat them up. But then Roman's music plays, and out comes he and Paul at 8:59 p.m. Eastern, by the way. Roman Reigns was on his way to the ring while violence was going on. And RK Bro are distracted by this, so the Usos take over and kick the shit back out of RK Bro, and then Reigns gets in the ring and stuffs the contract in Riddle's mouth. And then here comes Drew McIntyre to save the day. And as he's on his way to the ring, Drew McIntyre effortlessly, with one blow apiece, knocks out both the Usos and renders them useless to get in the ring and go face-to-face with Roman Reigns. There's the problem. The Usos beat up the top babyface teams and or hold the titles and or are in the championship matches or whatever in the tag team division. But when they cross over and interact in any way with Roman's opponents, they're the flunkies that are there to take one punch and sell like they're going to the electric chair. And so if in any other era or place in tag team wrestling, you didn't have any kind of separation anywhere near that, to where when Tully and Arn were the tag team champions in the NWA, and they jumped in the ring to do something with Flair, Dusty, or the Road Warriors, or whoever Flair's opponent was, treated them on the same level. Or the Midnight or the Rock and Roll or whoever it was, they were still top heels or top baby faces. And they were not used in flunky roles for one guy to just decimate a set of tag team champions that's supposed to be either the best or competitive for the best tag team in the company. But anyway, so Roman and Drew go face to face. Orton and Riddle now have completely disappeared, because the Usos beat them up, but they didn't fucking paralyze them, but they have to roll out of the ring, so that it's also stagey now. Guys just disappear and like roll into the wings and wait for their next cue to come on stage. So Orton and Riddle are gone, and the Usos are gone, so that Roman and McIntyre can have a big fight. And then Drew suplexes Roman. He rolls out on the floor. Now suddenly, Orton and Riddle come back in. Great friends, where were you when I needed you? Paulie never even came to ringside. It's like they're just being told now this is part of the choreography of how you do angles. You guys will disappear while these guys do this, and then you'll come back on stage. No wonder there's no heat. It was just there. What'd you think?
It was just there.
Would you like to go to what was next?
Yeah, I mean, this show is just so uninspiring. And I think the synthetic feeling of it is such a problem, from the fake crowd noise to people talking in a phony manner to people, the Raquel Gonzalez smiling thing we were talking about earlier. Sometimes you have to remind yourself she's an adult. And she's out there behaving like this. It's just.
And she's not in a parade.
It's like a whole separate universe where they got a bunch of bad shit, and even if no one reacts or they react the wrong way, they'll just pipe them down with their own fake crowd noise. I don't know why anyone would care about this, and I'm not sure if the fans did or didn't, because they have fake crowd noise. I didn't care.
But that's the thing. If you want to have a future as a float rider in the County Optimus Club parade or the 4-H or whatever. Go to the WWE. They'll give you good training in how to wave and smile. So Heyman went in the back, and he informed Adam Pearce that Roman Reigns wasn't happy, or sleepy, or grumpy, or dopey, or doc, or bashful, or sneezy. Did I get all of them again now? I don't even know.
Was that 7?
But I wasn't counting. We'll let one of the statistics hounds in the audience bring that up later. But he wanted, Paul Lee did, Adam Pearce to upgrade the tag team match that was already set. And this was a unification match for the titles, was it not?
I believe it was, yes. That was the only redeeming value in the entire program.
Well, but now it's a 6-man tag. And Drew and Roman are involved. So it's Roman and the Usos against RK Bro and Drew. And apparently this is on the pay-per-view that's the Sunday after the greatest 2 minutes in sports will be the most boring 4 hours in sports. Are we going to watch this thing?
Oh, I don't know.
We'll see Seth and Cody.
From what I understand, what happened was that Vince McMahon woke up and he said, have the Strongbows go over the Samoans. And it confused everyone. They didn't know what to do, so they just changed the match to make it easier.
Oh, well, we'll determine whether we watch this or not later on in the program.
Wait,
continue.
When is this event?
It's this Sunday.
It's this Sunday? Oh, shit.
The day after the Derby. Everybody knows the first Saturday in May is the Kentucky Derby.
Not everybody.
That's the way that you gauge the other events of the year round. Like, you want to know when Christmas is? Well, you just figure out that it's the 25th of December, the year before the following Kentucky Derby, the first Saturday in May. That's your reference point.
Or as we call it here in the Northeast, the Belmont Stakes.
Oh, for heaven's sake, you know Omaha steaks are much better than Belmont steaks. Last time I ordered meat from the Belmont Steaks, people, I could still see the marks where the jockey was beating it. Come on.
Hey, let me ask you something. While I was fast forwarding through all this crap that you're reviewing here, what do you think I was listening to?
What were you listening to? You could have had the choice because you can't hear anything over the blindingly deafening crowd noise, the fake crowd noise that the WWE pipes in. So you had to be listening to something where you could cancel out all of that hubbub around you and just listen to what you wanted to listen to. You had to also be listening in some fashion where your hands were free so you could operate your remote controller. You could take notes if you needed to. So I'm thinking if you're listening to what you want to listen to, if you're listening to it on something that will drown out exterior noise pollution, leave your hands free. Were you shaking your head in disgust, Brian, at the things you were seeing on the screen, but still you were able to hear what you wanted to hear?
Well, I was bouncing around the room because I was hearing what I wanted to hear, and it made me move. I was going to listen to reggae, and I figured that would make me get into a happy mood. That's really not the zone for SmackDown.
You were moving and grooving because somebody shot the sheriff.
Well, no, I was going to do that. Instead, I went with John Coltrane live in Seattle. I was ready to run through the wall.
Ah, well, there you go. But still, even when your head went through the plaster, you could still hear properly.
No, but it didn't go through. I'm saying I didn't headbutt the wall.
Oh, but if you had have, you'd have still been able to hear because these things wouldn't have fallen out. The point is, you've narrowed this down for me. I've solved the mystery. Brian, you were listening to your Raycon wireless earbuds, weren't you?
That's right. We still haven't said that, have we?
That's right. Well, see, I was narrowing things down. It's like, what's my line? Or, I'm trying the mystery guest. I'm trying to determine these things. I'm asking some true or false questions. Folks, the reason why that I was able to narrow that down is because if you got the Raycon wireless earbuds, you can hear what you want to hear. You'll hear it clearly. You won't have to use your hands. And no matter what you do with your head, the things will not fall out of your ears. They won't budge. They're in there for life. I mean, fucking, the mortician will be using some kind of pry bar to get these things out of your head.
No, they will not. They will come out easily when you want them to come out, and they will only be in your ears.
If you're not allowed to do it, let's say you die with your Raycon wireless earbuds in your ears.
Let's not say that. No.
It could happen. It could happen to anybody at any time. If you don't know how you put them in, it may be hard for other people to get them out, see? So everybody should have a pair of Raycons, because that way everybody will know how they work. And if you happen to be a mortician working on a corpse that has a pair of Raycons, you'll know how to get them out.
What if you want them in your ear when you're buried because you love them so much?
Well, in that case, you need to leave those specific instructions written and probably have it notarized and hang it up on your wall for the people who come in and find you in an advanced state of decomposition. But folks, I'll tell you another thing. This weekend is Mother's Day. Oh, for heaven's sake, they're making us watch a pay-per-view on Mother's Day. Well, that's just cruel and unusual punishment. But once again, if your mother needs a gift, then Raycon's got her covered, because you heard about these super moms, the masters of multitasking that need to keep their hands free to smack the little kids around.
That's not why they need to keep their hands free, no.
Well, they also need to wash dishes and wash pots and pans and wash diapers and wash cars. And
wash cars?
Yeah, for the family. You know, these super moms, they do everything. If you're a super mom, you can listen to your favorite podcast or your favorite music. You can take phone calls. They've got the vivid voice technology, and that's all hands-free, so you can keep working, because you don't want your husband to come home and say, "What have you been doing around here all day, lady? My shirts aren't ironed, and my laundry isn't clean, and my sewing isn't done, and the dinner's not on the table." What the heck? Then you might get smacked around. You don't want that to happen. So with the Raycons...
What world is this? This is 1955 you're talking about?
Well, I'm talking about Hugh Beaumont and Barbara Billingsley. You don't think that Ward
1959,
Cleaver,
excuse me.
Yeah, you don't think Ward Cleaver, when he came home and he found out that she'd been using her hands on spanking the beaver there when it was dinner time and dinner wasn't on the stove because June had been spanking the beaver all day?
Do you think if they were spanking the beaver, he would have been getting into all the mischief that he got into? I don't think they spanked him at all.
I think he would have. I think he liked it. I think he liked having that little beaver spanked.
No, he was.
And that's why he was getting into stuff on purpose. But folks, the Raycons...
Now tell me about Lumpy. What about Lumpy?
The Raycons won't fall out even out of Lumpy's head. And Lumpy was a little piece of shit, too. Let me tell you something. He was always instigating things. But if you want to get something with for your mother, the point is, and if you want to stick something in your mother's ears so she can hear what she wants to hear while she's doing all the work to take care of the family, reward her for all the work she does by giving her these things with 8 hours of playtime and a 32-hour battery life. Got a compact portable charging case, 49,000 5-star reviews. How many 5-star reviews does your mother have? You think she's got that many? Maybe it's your mother's not good enough for the Raycons instead of the other way around. Did you ever think about that? Maybe you ought to call these people at Raycon and say, please, can I have some Raycons for my mother, instead of just demanding things for your 5-star mother. But if you want to tell her how much you love her, folks, and everybody does, everybody wants to tell your mother how much they love her and how often. Go right now. Go right now to buyraycon, buyraycon.com/JCE. That's BUYRAYCON.com/JCE to get 15% off your Mother's Day order. Remember Mom on Mother's Day at buyraycon.com/JCE.
Of course, we want to encourage the listeners to support our friends at Raycon, and remember, those earbuds will come out safely when you choose for them to come out. But in the meantime, Jim...
But you might have to teach your mother how to get them out.
Did we finish SmackDown?
No, not yet, but the Raycons are more interesting. You know how mothers are with new technology. Have her pry them out with a Q-tip.
You know, they encourage people not to use Q-tips in the ears.
What? I've been using Q-tips ever since I was alive to clean my ears out.
Well, apparently a lot of people push the gunk further in their ear and potentially damage the eardrum.
What?
Okay, well, you said SmackDown wasn't over.
SmackDown. Back to SmackDown. Naomi wrestled Shayna Baszler, I'll have you know.
Oh, how many times did you hit fast forward?
Just once, because it was on when it started. And so I just got through. Now, apparently, Butch is missing. Their little mascot, Butch, over on their channel is missing, and neither Seamus, nor Holland, nor Dozier, nor Holland can find him. And they did some phony comedy about it. And then, I don't know what happened here, because, again, the fast forward button, but Xavier Woods with Kofi wrestled Holland with Seamus. And I wrote, goddamn, are there only 10 people on this roster? You can't find anybody in AEW, and you can't lose anybody in the WWE. So I was zipping past this, and somehow, after quite a while, the other guys were wrestling when I stopped the fast forwarding. So apparently Holland lost to Woods, and then Seamus beat Kofi, and then they powerbombed. I know you're going to be shocked at this, Brian. It never happens, but they powerbombed Woods through a table on the floor at the end of it. So we got that out of the way. Did you stop for Lacey Evans?
Oh, shit. You know what? I didn't, but I actually didn't even notice. I would have stopped for her.
I would have stopped for
I would have
her.
stopped for Lacey, but I missed it. Did she turn heel or anything, or is it just the same old?
No, but I'll tell you what. Daddy Evans, whoever Mr. Evans is, would be the biggest heel in the history of wrestling if he showed up next week. Because this was covering her military career, and guess what? Her father didn't come to her military graduation or coming out party, whatever is the procedure is called. The proudest day of her life. Her father wasn't there. She's tearing up. And it's still, they have some B-roll of some pictures, but otherwise it's her standing there again like she's, and I'm not faulting this girl for, there's again no way that you can just tell this story, as sad as it is, by just standing the talent up against a wall and piping in some music and having them pour their heart out. It comes off as awkward. And as we mentioned on the previous program that we did, like that the company is pushing this for sympathy in the wrong way instead of having it narrated and told and a package done and taking the burden off this poor girl in some respects. But her father, I'm telling you, he's got the heat. People would love to see him get the shit kicked out of him.
It's going to be really awkward when she comes out smiling next week.
I mean, well, only if her dad's not there. And maybe, yeah, I don't know. Could this all be a plot to introduce the father?
No.
Well, see, they're not thinking like Toots Mondt would then.
If they were going to hire, would they hire an old wrestler or would they hire some bad actor?
Well, would they and should they? Maybe two different questions. Would they hire an old wrestler? They should. Think Stella Mae French. Would they, or however else you phrased it, no, they probably would hire a bad actor. Speaking of bad acting, the main event that we basically were hoping would save this program, I didn't even know what it was. I was just waiting to see it. Turned out to be the Beat the Clock challenge between Ronda and Charlotte, where each one of them will have an opponent and they have to submit their opponent in the shortest time. That was the gist of the stipulation, as they say. And first was Ronda and Shotzi. And right as they're about to ring the bell, Charlotte makes her entrance and interrupts everything so she can make her entrance and also so we can have less time for this shit. And Ronda had extra horror movie eye makeup on, which, again, with the smiling that she's been told to do by Vince, but not soften up the eye makeup, it sort of looks like Freddy Krueger trying to be a clown at children's parties, doesn't it? I'm getting mixed messages.
Yeah, I don't get it.
So Shotzi decided to get on the bicycle and eat up some time. And finally, Ronda caught her, and there was some awkward struggling. Is that how you would phrase whatever they called the work that they did, awkward struggling, Brian?
Yeah, that's good.
Well, after some awkward struggling and not much of it, Rousey got the ankle lock and Shotzi tapped in 141. So Charlotte had to beat that time against Ilea, who I thought...
Ilea,
right?
Ilea. You saying Ilea?
Ilea?
Ilea.
Wasn't she a rapper that got killed?
That was a different person altogether. It was a plane crash many years ago.
Well, see, what I've told you about flying, folks.
What?
Well, don't get on those death tubes. But anyway, so, and did you see when Charlotte gets in the ring and starts doing the promo to set this second one up after Ronda's just standing there and Charlotte just dismisses her. Just get out of my ring. Just, are you still here? Just leave. And Ronda turns around and just walks out. What the fuck? So it's Charlotte against Ilea. Or is it Eileen? What was it?
Ilea.
It's not Eileen. Paul Morton used to say that. If you say, have you seen Eileen? No, I'll lean over and slap you. It sounded funny when he did it. Anyway, so it's Charlotte and Ilea.
Ilea.
And there's a little action to this. Something happened. And Charlotte goes for the figure 4 into the figure 8, but gets kicked out onto the floor, and that wastes a couple more seconds, and she gets back in and trips her up and gets the figure 8, but just then she's gone seconds longer than Ronda's time, so she loses the challenge. And the announcers were... was it McAfee trying to figure out who won in this or how to phrase how they won? Well, Charlotte didn't beat Ronda's time, even though she beat the blah, blah, blah. But anyway, they figured it out. And then Charlotte went out, and there's Drew. Now Drew Gulak went from an interviewer to Adam Pearce's intern to the bell ringing guy that rings the bell in the corner. That's what he's doing on this show. Is he going to be some flunky character from now on? Are they just trying to get some kind of use out of him before they release him? What is going on here that this guy's suddenly everywhere?
I don't know. This could go one of two ways. Either they put the belt on him or he's unemployed the rest of his life. I mean, but, we'll see what happens.
Well, anyway, Charlotte assaulted him and threw him in the ring and hit him with the ring bell that he's supposed to be ringing. So thank you again for coming, Drew Gulak.
I mean, sadly, if we're looking at this from a wrestling perspective, are they building up Drew Gulak versus Charlotte Flair?
Well, they can't, can they? Because they're not allowed to have women and men touching each other in inappropriate ways.
Forget those rules. If you just looked at it as how they're building it up on TV, is that what they're building up?
Oh, yeah. It is to me.
I think that's where, and then she'll crush him again. Oh, this is so bad.
But that was SmackDown.
Yeah,
that's it. That was all of it. I don't know what else to say. There was nothing else left.
The highlight of the show was just the moment they showed Drew Gulak at ringside as the timekeeper, and he had the little smile on his face, and you knew already it wasn't going to end well for him, and it cracked me up. That was the only thing I liked on the entire show.
Well, in that case, then, let's give Drew Gulak the respect he deserves for being the only entertaining thing on the program.
All right, well, that was SmackDown, and that was Beat the Clock. And speaking of Beat the Clock, let's beat the reviews, and let's get Friday out of the way. And then once we do that, we get questions and fun. Rampage!
Oh, yeah! This was April 29th also. And what is their lead-in to Rampage? From 8 to 10, is it a movie? What's going on Friday nights?
Yeah, I'm not certain. I don't know what it was this week specifically or any week.
Well, what kind of lead in are they trying to keep, and apparently failing because Rampage has been sucking pond water in the numbers lately, hadn't it? But they just started this program, no entrances, no introductions, straight to the bell, straight to the match, right?
Yeah.
And normally that's where on Wednesdays they're trying to keep the big bangers. So they send Punk out immediately or they jump into something or whatever. But in this case, on the Friday night show, Darby Allin versus Swerve Strickland in the for an Owen Hart tournament qualifier. So now they're saying that Sting, if they're trying to keep a lead in, Sting doesn't get an entrance now. He won't keep viewers. The snow in the middle of the spring, they just send Sting out there. He's standing at ringside, and they start this match. It's a babyface match. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Not only is this just a cold babyface match that they've gone straight into, Sting didn't even get an entrance, much less Darby or Swerve. But now, because this is a qualifying match, Swerve has just got there, and he won't make the actual tournament. So how does that present a new talent in a positive light when they can't even qualify for the tournament? Or would it have been better to use a flunky for these qualifying matches to get your stars in the tournament and have Swerve complain that he got here too late for an entrance berth in the tournament? Your thought?
It has been a bit much having multiple qualifying matches for several weeks in both men's and women's divisions. It's a whole big confusing mess. They haven't even started the tournament yet.
Well, how long is the tournament going to go? Is this going to be one of those Otto Vaughn's, Axel Dieter type of things that goes 2 months every night? Anyway, this match in a tent. And Darby with the jean shorts, the leggings, and the black shoes. Now, I think he looks like a Somali at S&M Club, doesn't he? Very different look going on there. So they did some high-level gymnastics, 2 or 3 spots on the floor that would kill somebody. And then Darby started selling on the floor. Swerve didn't do anything. Ref Aubrey stood there posing like she was in a Bob Fosse stage production and obviously not counting, just staring. And they were all just out there for about 40 seconds or so on the floor, and then they went to the break. And when they come back from the break, boom, boom, they're doing whatever. And then Swerve actually gives Darby Allin a vertical suplex from inside out, off the apron, onto the floor. Did you catch that one?
Yeah, of course.
In a babyface qualifying match on free television, a vertical suplex off the apron onto the floor, flat back. Both these guys are complete morons. And if I was Tony Khan or anyone in charge of this production, I would have fined both of them some sizable amount of money, like $500 to $1,000 a piece, and taken them off TV for a month for doing that. But I'm sure that these fucking imbecile marks that are in charge of this thing that happens probably applauded them when they came back. Oh, that was so great to kill the vertical suplex for any of our main event talent. And the guy that took the bump moments later won the match and beat you, Swerve, flat in the middle of the ring. So, any way you look at it, Swerve's a goddamn complete moron. Because he gave a guy a vertical suplex off the apron of the floor and took the bump himself. So he's a moron. He gave that guy that move and then turned around, and seconds later, that fucking guy beat him flat in the middle of the ring, so he's a moron. And Darby Allin wholeheartedly went along with taking that bump, so he's a fucking moron. And as I mentioned, Tony Khan or nobody else is in charge enough of this fucking fiasco to yell at him or fine him or both, so he and they are morons. That's what I got out of that match. Oh, and then Santana and Ortiz came out to the desk because Jericho was on color and beat him up and then left. So now after that, by the time they go to the break, nobody remembers the vertical suplex. Because I spent more time talking about it than the announcers did.
And no one remembers Santana and Ortiz got their comeback on Jericho after he destroyed them and burned Eddie Kingston the other day. It was buried on the Friday night show, and it's going to go away.
Well, they did replay the fireball in slow motion, which clearly showed it going straight over the top of Kingston's head. Next on Rampage, Red Velvet, Kierra Hogan, and Jane Cargill wrestled Sky Blue, Trish Adora, and Willow Nightingale. And the big question here is Kierra Hogan Brooks' sister. Or do we know, is there any relation?
I'm going to say this one time. I haven't seen too much of Kierra Hogan. I saw her here. I'm going to say this one time because, look, it's on TV. And it came out with her, like, basically mooning the audience. What an ass on this girl. Hey, she's got one of the greatest asses I've ever seen in my entire life. I couldn't stop focusing on it. I mean, it helps that she has like a wedgie. But my God, I'm not going to do this again on the show, but I had to say it once out loud, and you guys are my wrestling friends here. My God, what an ass.
All right. Well, I'm glad you... Fast forward, I couldn't tell it was a wedgie.
You shouldn't have fast forwarded.
It was a 6-girl tag.
That's right. Or a trios match, as we call it in AEW.
Uh-huh.
No, I actually would like you to watch all the Jade Cargill matches because she's their big project. She's the one that they clearly see something in. They use her better than every other champion, as we discussed. And she's still learning on the fly. So I feel like
that I'll break down and watch all of her singles matches involving any legitimate opposition.
And Red Velvet's good.
I walked into a fucking White Castle restaurant here in Louisville about, this is probably nearly 45 years ago. And one of the girls working the counter, they have the name tags on. And there it is. Her name tag says Velvet. I said, "Oh, Velvet?" And she smiled. Said, "Yes." I said, "Have you ever been felt?" And then she stopped smiling. I don't know why. So the next match was Keith Lee versus Colton Gunn with his brother Austin Gunn. And I wanted to see this because I'm a big Gun Boys fan. The Ass Club or the Gun Club or the Ass Boys or whatever. And also, Keith Lee, as we mentioned, when was his debut on this program? About 6 weeks ago now. His first match in was the most perfect debut match I've ever seen anybody have in AEW. He got over like a monster and won convincingly. So I thought, okay, let's see what he's doing. Did you watch this?
Yes, I did.
Well, I noted that Colton Gunn has great personality. I noted that Keith Lee did a grand total of a double-handed chop in the first 2 minutes, and then they went to the break. I'm thinking, okay, they're backloading this thing. They come back. Keith Lee makes a comeback, gives him the big Beal, nails Austin off the apron. Colton goes for the famouser. Keith Lee was supposed to catch him up when he did that and powerbomb him, but Colton jumped up, and Keith Lee never stood up under him. He just let Colton leapfrog him, and he landed on the other side, and then Colton landed on the other side and looked like, how the fuck did I get here? And he turned around, and then Keith Lee popped him up and popped him up for the power bomb, but Colton fights out, and then Keith Lee hits the DVD power slam combo 1, 2, 3. This was the most lackluster performance I've ever seen him put in. Was it the lateness of the hour, the deadness of the crowd after Dynamite? The Gun Boys were trying here, but
I think the problem is, and we were both guys who like Keith Lee in NXT, that since he appeared in AEW, he's looked older every week, and he's looked bigger every week, and slower every week. And the makeup of the matches, the way these are put together, is not helping him at all. It exposes him as being older and bigger and slower each and every time he's out there.
Was it the COVID that he had? Is he suffering long-term COVID effects? Do you think? Because I don't want to blister the guy for things beyond his control. And I mean, 6 weeks ago, he looked fantastic. This was not much to write home about.
Let me ask you this, and I don't know if you would know the answer exactly, and I would know a little bit, and you would know a little bit, but I don't know if you know the exact answer. But if you wrestle for NXT, and you're on their show, and they're not running house shows, let's say, what are the expectations of you? Are you expected to be seen in the gym? Are you expected to be working out and seen working out? Because, and I'm not even trying to single out Keith Lee, I'm just wondering in general, if you go from that system where you're on TV, you're wrestling at least once a week, but you're also working out the rest of the week, and you go to AEW where you can do that, but you're also kind of your own boss in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And no one's there to really watch after you. Not that an adult should need that, but do you think that could cause a problem or that could cause a change in some of these guys?
It's very possible, because I'm not going to pretend that everybody in NXT's deal is exactly the same or everything is expected out of them. You know, if some guys are rehabbing injuries, their physicality would be lighter, or if some guys have achieved a certain level of experience, or they may be imminently about to be called up, they might not have to make every practice, but at the same time, they'd be working on whatever it is they're supposed to be doing in the future. The last time that I was aware of, the way they were doing things, yes, if you were in the developmental program, they didn't.
Well, that's why I'm trying to clarify.
But that's why I'm saying that maybe I don't know that they monitor your actual gym workouts, lifting weights or Stairmaster or whatever type of training. That's what I'm trying to differentiate. I don't know if they monitor that, but I know that there was a level of commitment that you were expected to have for the in-ring training or drills or practice or workouts or whatever the case. And yeah, if he was in that program at least until the end, when he got COVID, he was off for a while, then came back as Bearcat, was back and forth, and then released. So for the last year, he has probably not been training as diligently, as regularly, or in the same way as he was for the couple of years before that, when he was in the NXT program and not being jerked around, going back and forth, whatever the case. So yeah, if he's not taking it upon himself, he would gain weight. And at his age and that size, your cardio is going to take a noticeable hit if you don't.
Was that the main event?
No.
Oh.
The main event was Tony Schiavone now dyeing his hair and beard completely brown again. We're back to 1992. Did you notice that they had a backstage interview with Matt and Jeff Hardy where all they were doing was talking about who is going to qualify and how against who in the Owen Hart tournament? So the Hardy Boys have been reunited for less than 2 months now, and now they're relegated to backstage pre-tapes about who's qualifying in a tournament. They're regular guys on the roster. There's nothing different now. That's it. That whole pop and honeymoon period and the whole 9 yards is officially over. Can you believe that? They fucked up the Hardy Boys reunion. How the fuck do you do that?
They fucked it up from the moment Jeff danced running down the aisle. I mean, from that moment on, because you got the pop, and then you immediately started using them, and then immediately it was garbage matches, and immediately it exposed that they can't do what they did 20 years ago. No one can.
Right.
But they certainly can't. And now they're going to compete for the Owen Hart tournament.
And then they had a promo from the Elite where Bobby Fish did call Jeff Hardy Jeff Hardley. Bobby Fish with Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, and the Hardley Boys looks like a divorced father with 4 problem teenagers on a field trip. It just... So then the Danhausen thing. Danhausen comes down the ramp. He's in the makeup. He's doing the voice. Still, no one has made any effort to explain, because it's inexplicable. You can't explain what it is without making the wrestling business look like a fucking shit show. But he's there to take Hook out, and he gets in the ring on the microphone and demands, send Hook, or whatever. And Taz is there at the announce desk and has to be calling this. And my God, one would have thought that Taz, of all people, had enough pull with Tony Khan to get his own son out of this, because his own son is getting over.
How about the fact that a couple of weeks ago, Taz walked down the ringside when his guys were wrestling. Everyone's like, oh my God, what's Taz doing here with Team Taz? His son's in the ring. They're trying to assault him. You'll talk about what happens. Taz doesn't go down for that. He just stays on commentary. It's his son.
So Hook comes out and gets face to face with Danhausen, and suddenly Danhausen is a little intimidated. And nothing happens, thankfully, but unfortunately Mark Sterling interrupts, and he doesn't want to see him fight. He says, does anybody here want to see these two fight? And they all scream, yes, because they want to see Hook, whatever the fuck. But anyway, while they're distracted, Hook and Danhausen, Tony Nese attacks both of them from behind in the ring. Tony Nese is apparently a client of Mark Sterling and is apparently the hottest free agent in the business. We know this because at least once and maybe twice, they've had a shot of him on television sitting at ringside and would say that. Otherwise, this fucking guy is not at a match on television, much less beat anybody. Suddenly, he attacks both Hook and Danhausen, but Hook makes a comeback and bumps Nese out, and then Danhausen curses the heels in the aisleway. And then he goes to shake Hook's hand, and Hook shoves him and leaves. And they're going to fuck up and fuck Hook around now with this stupidity and foolishness. A guy that's getting over, that's been nothing but serious, that's in shape, whose matches have been good, especially for his experience level, and who's got all kinds of weird charisma that people want to watch him. And they stick him with this joke indie outlaw mud show bullshit. So that was my thought on this fucking thing. And then the main event was Samoa Joe versus Trent for the ROH TV title. And I don't need to see Trent or Pockets or Chucklefuck after I just saw this embarrassing bullshit. Even though I'd like to see Samoa Joe because he's a fucking superstar, I was so offended by their booking malfeasance. I say, you know what? It ain't fucking worth it, because maybe Pockets is going to goddamn fly from the roof and fucking cover and pin Samoa Joe, and then I'll throw my television off the deck. So I skipped their main event on their throwaway show because the stuff I was already watching was so insulting. Did I miss anything?
Few things. Ian Riccaboni on commentary.
Well, shit. I would have actually liked to have heard Ian.
It was nice to hear Ian. I wish we could have heard more of him. They probably could have gotten rid of a couple of the other people at the table. Even if you wanted to leave Excalibur, you don't need Jericho there for this match or anyone else.
But the first thing they ought to do is have Excalibur leave the desk and glue that chair to Ian Riccaboni's ass. But that would just be the sensible thing to do.
You know, the best friends are just lame right now. They're the Bushwhackers in like 92. Even if you were the biggest Bushwhacker fan, even if you wanted them to lick your head, by like 92, you couldn't really be that excited about them anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the way I think the best friends are. They're just a lame act at this point. I'd like to see them do something better with Joe as opposed to burying him in the main event on the Friday night show at close to 11 o'clock. The Hook Danhausen thing, I just want to comment on that real quick, because it reminded me of the worst of ECW when ECW was at its best. And what I mean is, like, there was always goofy shit on that show, on the ECW show, that would just kind of like end. Like, it was almost like Paul would say, go out there and just, we'll come up with an ending. And there was no ending, and just things ended. That's what this felt like. Just Hook just got out of the ring and walked away. And I guess my question for Taz would be, when you were getting built up and doing your thing seriously, did you want to be in segments with the BWO? Or did you want to be in segments with Sabu? Hook shouldn't be in stuff with Danhausen, not right now.
Very applicable simile.
And I got nothing personally against members of the BWO. It's about the actual...
the presentation.
Presentation, that's right.
There you go. Well, they presented that, and I presented it right back to them. So where we go from here?
Where we go from here is the idea that after something like that, if you actually sat down in your chair and watched that show, maybe you are an AEW fan. And maybe you actually get really excited about what you see. You get into the matches, you're pumping your fists, you're bouncing up and down. Maybe after that, you've noticed, I can't believe I'm doing this transition. You've noticed some sort of odor disseminating from your lower regions. It must be because of all that hair, this unnecessary follicle growth that you can now take care of with an LED light.
The follicular growth that comes from dark, damp, dank, moist nether regions that are not sufficiently plowed and furrowed and trimmed and mulched appropriately, is what you're saying. It is a foul funk that emanates from a place like that. But you know how you can whip that, Brian. Our friends at Manscaped.
They can whip the foul funk?
You can whip the foul funk. He was the worst of those funk boys. There was Dory, there was Terry, and there was Foul. Also Flash.
Oh, Foul, also known as Marty.
Hey, but folks at Manscaped, I'll tell you what, Mother's Day is coming up. Now, how does this affect the folks at Manscaped? Well, you got to do something nice for all the mothers. And many of the mothers on Mother's Day may come in contact with the fathers or potential fathers. And they may have some tryouts to determine whether those potential fathers will become fathers. And if you're going to have tryouts, you got to have a clean playing field. And folks, I'll tell you what, you do not want...
Ridiculous.
I mean, especially in the summertime, folks, and with humidity coming back in, whipped cream and pubic hair is a nightmare combination for you're going to get a sour milk kind of aura coming off of your crotch, regardless of what gender you are. When it comes in, even the extra heavy whipped cream, and even whether it's spray or whether it's spoon on, once it gets mixed in with pubic hair, folks, that's mildew waiting to happen. But folks, all you got to do to be ready for Mother's Day, Father's Day, or any other day that anything might happen is the ultra smooth package from Manscaped. Because that way you can keep looking, feeling, and smelling your best with this specialized groin shaving kit that helps you buff, protect, and shave your most sensitive areas. And then once you buff them, protect them, and shave them, then you can pull them, you can push them, you can yank them, you can crank them, you can do everything because you'll get a better grip, as well as they'll look better. They can be presented better. You might want to put it in a box. You might want to put a flower arrangement around it for Mother's Day, whatever you want to do. With the electric trimmer known as the Lawnmower 4.0 to give your boys the classic trim, get the loose hairs out of the way. Nothing worse on Mother's Day than having pubic hair substitute for dental floss. Then you'll grab the crop exfoliator that's infused, possibly even riddled with ingredients that soothe, clear, and keep the skin on and around your essential area feeling refreshed. Then the crop gel, you can see where you're shaving with the crop gel that is like a spa treatment with essential oils, and then the crop shaver with 3 precision blades, including the extra wide lubricating strips. You always need lubrication on things in these areas. And if you don't have Crisco, sometimes you can, if you got a thing of bacon grease, you can just stick your hand in there and smear it all around. But if you don't have the bacon grease, folks, you got to go with the Manscaped items. And the crop shaver has a pivoting head And everybody knows that pivoting is the best kind of head. It goes up, it goes down, it turns left, it turns right, it goes back and forth and pivots all around, jumps up and down and does the hokey pokey. Folks, if your head is pivoting, you know that you're going to have excellent delivery to the tonsils.
God damn it, what the hell are you talking about?
The pivoting head on the crop shaver with the extra wide lubricating strips and the pivoting head, you can just go in any direction. It's not your average razor.
No.
It's smaller and thicker with a micro comb bar. And all of these items, folks, are vegan, cruelty-free, sulfate-free. There's not a goddamn sulfate to be found in any of these things. Go ahead, test them, I dare you. Sniff them, snort them, eat them, put them on crackers. You will not taste nor smell a sulfate amongst any of these products because Manscaped, they have fine morals and they're not going to be associating with the sulfate people. And right now, for Mother's Day, again, Mom, get you the big one for Mother's Day. I'm telling you, your significant others, guys, will thank you for dressing this area up so it's presentable when the mother does her duty. 20% off and free shipping with the code DRIVE at manscaped.com. 20% off free shipping with the code DRIVE at manscaped.com. Your balls will thank you, and so will your wife, your mother, potentially in Alabama, your sister or cousin. It just depends, but a lot of people will thank you because we've been meaning to talk to you about the odor emanating from your nether regions.
All right, well, that was Manscaped, and speaking of odors from the nether regions,
have you had a problem with the whipped cream mixing with the humidity and I guess there's some perspiration down there as well as the follicular makeup of the pubic hair?
I don't know what Herb Alpert kind of situation you got going on at Castle Cornette, but let's get going here with some wrestling.
Herb Alpert?
That's right.
What's he got to do with whipped cream?
Well, Jim, speaking of an odor from the nether regions, several people have sent in a quote from Twitter, I guess over the weekend, from Ryback. Have you caught wind of any of this?
I caught wind of it. I saw several people had been taking him to task for what he said, which did seem to be very out of place or misdirected anger toward Vince McMahon's mother, who just died at like 100 years old.
Well, let's read this just so we have it here on the record. And again, Ryback was a wrestler with WWE.
Yeah, that's right. You must remind everybody because it's been like 2 years and he was forgettable 15 minutes after he was on the air. Yeah, Punk said he's the one that about fractured him on numerous occasions.
Punk was like the first guy to come out and say, this guy's an idiot and this guy hurt me. Of course, Ryback denied it. And then I think Ryback has had problems with various people. He was aligned with Heyman. I don't know if they necessarily get along anymore. WWE let him go. Since that time, he's had a very curious presence on social media, at times requesting people participate in polls to determine where he will appear next. The option at which usually is retire or don't.
Yes. Yeah, by far the winning choice is please retire, don't return.
AEW has not seemed interested. WWE, you would think, would be his only hope. And let's go to this quote here from Twitter. Vince McMahon, like most promoters, has an insatiable urge to have control. He had no control watching his mom get beat up as a child, which is a horrendous thing for a kid to witness. As their whore mom tries to... I can't
Jesus
even
Christ, you can't say it with a straight face.
I can't because it just goes so off the rails. Which is a horrendous thing for a kid to witness as their whore mom tries to make ends meet. Vince has failed to evolve. Fuck you, old man. So clearly he's looking for work.
Yeah, I mean, obviously. We've come to the realization the guy's a fucking mental case over the last couple of years. Every time he runs his pie hole, but he is still very mad at Vince McMahon that you can't even call Vince names. You have to call his poor deceased mother who just died at 100 years of age and had nothing to do with your rotten wrestling career. You have to call her a whore as a backhanded way of expressing sympathy on Vince McMahon for not being. What the fuck is the matter with this guy? Is he just that upset that he was a complete and utter failure in the professional wrestling business and nobody wants to work with him or see him again? That he has to call a 100-year-old innocent woman a whore? A whore?
I don't know what his issue is. I mean, we could all assume things. We could all guess things. I mean, this is a guy who was a wrestling fan. Certainly built up his body in the traditional sense of 1980s professional wrestlers. Found himself out of work, at least from professional wrestling. I don't know if he does anything on the side, like Uber or whatever, rents his place on Airbnb. But what else is he going to do? I mean, and then he goes on social media, and if he's trying to build a fan base, I don't think it's going the way he hoped. It's hard behavior to understand, and sadly, when people lose it a little bit like this, things typically don't get better. They just keep getting worse.
But that he's got to blame Vince, apparently, for, gosh, this didn't work, so it's all Vince's fault. If it was Steve Austin sitting there, I'd say, well, you might have a point, Stone Cold. You probably could have got over a little better, but fucking Fatback? Fuck him I never even met Vince's mother. Fuck him just for calling her a whore.
Do you think he's done with wrestling, or do you think he's perfect material for Control Your Narrative?
I don't think wrestling's done with him. I mean, there's no clamor for, oh my God, there's no dream match. There's no, where is he? When's he going to come back? The people who are asked directly by him indicate to him that they'd like not to see any more of him. So I'm not sure that there's going to be a bidding frenzy coming up anytime soon for Ryback's services.
Well, Jim, another popular topic from the world of WWE have been several releases in the last week from NXT. Have you seen this? Have you seen the list of wrestlers that were released?
Well, I saw them I've never seen the entire compilation. I saw them one at a time as the word was coming out and tried to keep track. I may have lost it. Do you have the comprehensive information there? It doesn't look like we've lost the next Stone Cold on any of these names. Nothing registered with me as a drastic error, but we'll see. What is the list?
Dexter Loomis released.
And I like the guy under there. I've said before, I don't like Dexter Loomis, because I get where they were going, a spooky movie serial killer, but he was made too clean, too non-scary, too ineffective, and a little bit slow and plodding. But the guy underneath there, Sam Shaw, he is a talented guy. He's big. He's got the size. He can move around. He can work a bit. He's an artist. But that gimmick is the only serial killer I've ever seen that wasn't particularly scary. And that was before they started making him do the stupid, ignorant, silly romance bullshit with who was Index or
Indy Hartwell.
I know, that's what I think. The duo was Indy and Dexter were Index, like Genlo or Brad.
Genlo?
Brad Ann. What are their names? Jen Brad. When they
Benifer, like that?
Benifer, yeah. When they combine the names Brad of the couple. Bran Ann, what are these people? I don't know. I don't care about their fucking sordid lives, but
what do you think this says about WWE separating a married couple, firing one guy and keeping the wife?
What are the children gonna do? And right before Mother's Day, poor old Indy Hartwell won't have a visible means of support now that Loomy is unemployed.
Well, now hold on. On the show, this has been her lover, her now husband. If she's still there and he's not, do they address it on the show? Do they kill him off screen?
Ooh, are they going to do like a fucking, when they had to kill off the John Amos character? Well, no, I'm thinking John Amos in Good Times. Florida lost the husband when he left, right? And they kill him somehow?
Valerie Harper on the Hogan family.
There you go. Well, that was a mistake anyway.
What do you
Valerie
mean?
Harper should have never been married on television.
Well, what are you trying to say?
She was great as Rhoda. Remember, Rhoda got married? That didn't work either.
Well, they gave Rhoda her own show.
But then she got married, and then it worked out so
became the Hogan family.
She got divorced.
They
no, it didn't become the Hogan family.
I'm joking.
Her name wasn't Rhoda Hogan.
I know. It certainly was. Rhoda Hogan. All right. Well, also released from NXT. See, this is one that actually surprised people, Jim. Harland, who, formerly known as Parker Bordeaux, was someone...
Boudreaux. You ever been to Louisiana, boy?
Oh, Parker Boudreaux.
Boy, you ever been to Louisiana?
I have not been to Louisiana, boy.
Well, they make fun of you down there if you were.
What part of Louisiana you been to, boy?
They make fun of you down there if you were from Louisiana.
Well,
I'll tell you what.
Harland has been released.
I guarantee.
This is someone who has an amateur wrestling background. He looked like a young Brock Lesnar, although with tattoos. What are your thoughts on this release?
Well, and that's the PR that he got when they first signed him. Parker Boudreaux, he's been a wrestling fan. He's a big-time shooter. He looks like a young Brock Lesnar. Then they stick him with this fucking fat tub of goo Joe Gacy in an inexplicable mute enforcer gimmick. And I have to assume with a guy with a look and a credentials and background and everything like that, that they have just determined that either his in-ring work and potential is fucking nil and not going to get better, or he's got some kind of personal problem. That would be this quick for a guy with potential like that was talked about at the start like that. They've soured for one of two reasons, the person or the person's ability. And I have no idea we've seen nothing really to gauge what it could be, because he doesn't wrestle. He just hangs around with Gacy and what I still can't understand. Apparently the writers are trying to get on Vince's good side by making Gacy some kind of supposed left-wing person who likes the safe space or whatever but it's so ass backwards in the way that they're coming about it, trying to make the person who nominally would be a babyface a heel, but he says shit cryptically, and I don't know what the fuck's going on. And Harlan's been standing there watching him do it.
Also released, Malcolm Bivens, the manager, and I see here a report that Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful said that Bivens turned down a new contract earlier in the year.
Well, okay. Well, then, so his contract didn't expire yet. They were trying to get him to sign a new one ahead of time, and now since he didn't, they released him, is what that would indicate, apparently.
Apparently.
And they wanted to keep him. He didn't want to. Why would he want to stay? What do any of these managers, there's a few of them, but what do they actually do? Every single one of them comes off as scripted and rehearsed. They never interfere in any meaningful way. They don't play any part in turning the tide of a match finish. They just do some promos and then do what somebody feels like comedy manager spots are. So, if he's a good manager and he goes somewhere else, we might be able to tell. Because you can't in the WWE because of what they're allowed or not allowed to do or say.
How much do you think they pay the managers in NXT?
There ain't more than one, is there?
Well, there was that Robert Stone, right?
Oh, Robert Stone, but they signed him to be a wrestler and he got hurt originally, didn't he?
Oh, I know he was a wrestler. I don't know if they signed him to be a wrestler.
I don't know, but I mean, honestly, more money than they're worth, because they're not made to be worth anything, and everybody in that company gets paid more money than they should these days. But I have no idea how much it would be. And again, all the managers are either of underneath talent, underneath guys except for Heyman, or just come off as bleh in the WWE. And in AEW, they're all, the over-the-hill gang, retired wrestlers that never really managed to begin with, but were noted as being good promos and don't know how to transition to the new role. So, except for Paul Heyman, find me a good manager that you'd like to watch, you believe, and is involved with any main event talent.
You know, one of the sad parts of the Harlan decision is we never get to see how far they could really go pushing someone named Harlan. Gunther versus Harlan, WrestleMania!
Oh, come on. Harlan isn't just German.
It's not German. It's a first name. Harlan and Gunther are first names. Then you have Riddle and Theory, which are last names. So I figured the guys with the first names would wrestle each other.
Well, maybe you could team them up with one of each, and it could be the Harlan Theory and the Gunther Riddle.
The Harlan Theory. I like that. Yeah. All right. Well, another release from NXT, Dakota Kai.
Shucks. We hardly got a chance to know her, and she's gone. You like Dakota Kai, right? She lost her mind here recently.
As anyone would in NXT.
Well, yes, but I wonder if the therapy didn't take, and she was still seeing the people that weren't there, or whatever was going on with her. What else are they going to do?
Very talented as a babyface, talented as a heel. I could see her going to AEW, but we'll see what happens. Other talent released, and I'll name these people, but I don't know who they are. I don't know if you will. I don't even know if they're real names or fake WWE names. Raylan Divine. Okay, they're fake WWE names.
Yeah.
Persia Parada.
Well, remember Persia Parada? See, now they've just fucked up everybody's love life. Because Indy Hartwell and Dexter Loomis were mad at Persia Parada and Duke Hudson because wasn't Duke with Indy before Dexter, but now Persia, who was Indy's friend, was hanging around with Duke, but Indy was telling her that he was bad news. You know what? They just got rid of the fucking troublemakers in those couples, and now the other two that aren't the troublemakers, they can start fucking each other.
Well, we will have to see what happens this Tuesday on NXT.
Duke and Indy are going to get together. Trust me on this, folks.
Also released, Mila Milani.
What?
And Draco Anthony.
And Draco Anthony.
His name is Draco, not Ann Draco.
You said and Draco.
I said Mila Milani and Draco Anthony.
Oh, I thought you said Andraco. Like Andrew and Draco.
When I was a little kid, I'd watch Saturday Night Live reruns. I thought her name was Ann Gilda Radner. I didn't realize they were saying and Gilda Radner. I thought they were saying Ann Gilda Radner. But also released, Jim, Sanjana George.
Who?
And Paige Prinzivali.
Wait a minute. Paige Prinzivali. Obviously that's a fake name, but why did they make up names now that nobody's even going to be able to figure out how to spell?
I can't explain what they do and how they do it in the wild world of WWE.
You know, at least if I was a kid and I heard Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, I can spell those names. I can talk about them on the playground, my friends. But I can't talk about Draco Anthony and Flapjack Acetaminophen, whatever the fucking name is you just said.
I don't know if Flapjack Acetaminophen was Sanjana George or Paige Prinzivali, but those have been your NXT releases this week. Stay tuned next week for more news about more people WWE will be breaking the hearts of, as they do each and every week, it seems like.
I don't know. Sometimes it's a feeling of relief and elation when you get released from jail. I've experienced that a couple of times, and it's very, very freeing and liberating.
Well, speaking of being released from jail, I'm going to release you from the chains where you have to answer my questions here, and you said you had an email. I'd like to hear what this email was.
Well, I do. I have one here because it was sent in. You know, we've got such a talented and intelligent listenership. The cult of Cornette, the people out there, they've got talents. They're intelligent. They're well-read, well-spoken. We were discussing here a week or so ago on one of the programs about the preponderance, the cornucopia, the plethora of gimmick matches and stipulation matches and no rules matches or stupid rules matches, all of the different shit in AEW, right? And just it's constant and never ending. And some of the listeners have taken us to heart and done some research. We read one email last week on the experience, and this looks at it, the predominance of all of these matches from a little bit different standpoint, some different statistics. It's from Cole from State College, Pennsylvania. See, our listeners are so smart, they live in towns with colleges not only in them, but in the name. That's how smart our people are. You might just find a guy with a Cornette face t-shirt on and have him do your taxes. It'll just like that. So Cole from State College says, hi, Jim and Brian. So at least, again, you're making the heading. Recently, you had mentioned wanting a complete list of matches in AEW that had some type of gimmick added on. As a fun project for myself and using the database at cagematch.net. Now, this was different from the SmackDownHotel.com. Apparently, there's a plethora of these sites as well with this information. But he says, I went through every AEW event and compiled a list of AEW matches with some type of hardcore stipulation attached to them. This list does not include the endless numbers of three-ways and four-ways and battle royals with no disqualifications, as even a man in prison wouldn't have the time to make a list that long. Matches with special rules that aren't inherently or normally no DQ, Iron Man, Tornado Tag, Handicap, Mixed Tag, etc. are also excluded. This list is complete as of the episode of Rampage that aired on April 29th, 2022. Here are some notable points. Hold on, I got to take a big swig for this one.
Oh.
There have been, and again, this is just in less than 3 years that this company has been in existence. There have been 73 matches with a special hardcore-related stipulation. Of the 73, 38 have occurred on Dynamite, 23 on pay-per-view, 6 on Rampage, 6 on Dark. They do hardcore matches on Dark. 1 on a pay-per-view pre-show and 1 on the House Always Wins house show. Of the 134 episodes of Dynamite, 34 have featured a hardcore match of some kind, which is about 25%, not including three-ways and four-ways with no disqualification. So 25% as an average of the episodes of Dynamite have had some type of hardcore, no DQ, no rules, anything goes match. Of the 39 episodes of Rampage that just came along last August, 6 have featured a hardcore match, down to only 15%. The first hardcore stipulation match occurred on the pre-show for Fyter Fest 2019. Do you remember Michael knock it to fuck off and get off my television, and Alex Jebailey, some video game goof in the hardcore match?
That's right.
The most frequently used stipulations are the following: no disqualification, no count out 10 times, street fight 9 times, falls count anywhere, street fight 8 times, ladder match 7 times, lights out match 6 times. They have 7 ladder matches. The wrestlers who have appeared in the most garbage matches, you're never going to guess who the top 2 are. They're tied. Take a wild guess who in AEW have appeared in the most garbage matches.
Sammy Guevara.
You got one.
Moxley?
You got both. John Moxley and Sammy Guevara tied at 10 times each. Followed by Chris Jericho and Cody Rhodes at 9 times. Darby Allin, I started to say Joey Nutella instead of Jelly Nutella. I apologize. Jelly Nutella and Matt Hardy 8 times. Jake Hager, Lance Archer, Twinkle Toes, the Hardley Boys, Ortiz and Santana at 7 times each. Pockets at 6. And there was a period during July of 2021 where in 4 weeks of Dynamite, there were 5 hardcore matches. July 7th, Cody versus QT Marshall in a strap match. Also July 7th, the Hardly Boys versus Kingston and Penthouse in a street fight. July 14th was Darby Allin and the other Page in a coffin match. July 21st was Archer and Moxley in a supposed Texas death match. And July 28th was the infamous Jericho versus the bank-addicted drug robber in a no-rules match. The longest gap between hardcore matches on Dynamite was 71 days. The longest they have gone is a little over 2 months on television between having garbage matches. In 2020, there were 13 hardcore matches on Dynamite. In 2021, there were 14. Up to this point in 2022, there have already been 9. And 2 episodes, January 26th this year and April 27th, had 2 matches on the same episode. January 26th had Sammy and Cody in the ladder match and Pockets and Cole in a lights out match. And April 27th had Serena and Hikaru Shida in a street fight and Scorpio and Sammy in another ladder match. And also Cole attached a spreadsheet for our reference, but I don't know how to work those things. But they might as well just say just everything is no rules and means nothing, because almost everything is no rules and does mean nothing. This in less than 3 years, they have killed off and made meaningless and ordinary and routine and blasé almost every gimmick match that exists in the wrestling business. Very interesting reading.
I mean, we've seen a lot of gimmick matches in just the last few weeks.
You know what a gimmick match needs to be in AEW?
What's that?
1 fall, 60-minute time limit, first person to break the rules loses. That's it. That would be a gimmick match. They've never had another one.
Well, Jim, let's get another email here. This isn't actually a question. It's in reference to something we talked about on the Experience, I believe, last week. Dusty Rhodes and Andy Warhol's diary. Someone found the entry that I mentioned, and they sent it in here. From February 20th, 1978. I'll read portions of this. Monique Van Moren was having a sit-down dinner at Premiere at 9:30, and I'd said yes. I forgot that Tom Sullivan had tickets for wrestling, because he'd met Dusty Rhodes the wrestler at an airport, and they'd become friends. Let me go past this next one. Here we go. Tom picked us up there at 8:30, and we went over to the Garden, and there were like 26,000 people there. I thought wrestling was a dead sport. I didn't know so many people went to it. Dusty Rhodes was wrestling a Japanese guy. They all wear sequins, all of them. I guess they got their style from Gorgeous George. He really influenced them. And they strip on stage.
And by the way, Andy Warhol may have been a groundbreaking artist, but he's no fucking William Shakespeare as a writer, by the way.
What's his diary again? Catherine went to take pictures, but the fight was over in 8 minutes. Now they're getting good-looking wrestlers. Dusty Rhodes said he'd be right out, but he didn't come out until about 20 minutes. He wore lots of jewelry, gold things, and he had dark glasses on. But when he took them off, it looked like he still had them on. He had huge dark rings around his eyes, and he had lots of bruises all over. We took him with us to Monique's Diner. He has here in parentheses wrestling tickets, $16. Then we went to the Lone Star, and they wanted to go dancing. Up to Harrah's. Dusty was a little apprehensive when he saw all the fairies, and he asked for a girl. The owner got a girl from someplace behind.
Wait, hold on. The first thing I thought was fairies and pixie dust and everything, but apparently this is the 70s non-politically correct version.
And let's also mention Andy Warhol was a gay man, so he's saying it about other gay men.
Did you know Andy?
Yeah, actually we did.
Okay, well, I did not. So I wasn't aware of what his various persuasions were.
Well, he didn't really announce it, but now all these years later, there have been books, there have been different things that have come out about different people he was partners with throughout his life.
Well, what does his business partners have to do with this?
Well, okay, let's get back to this. When he saw the fairies, he asked for a girl. The owner got a girl from someplace behind us, and he fixed him up with her. Then, after Harrah's, we dropped Dusty and the girl at the Sheridan, and Catherine and Tom picked up hamburgers, and we went to Westbury. They dropped me off.
You know, I wonder if Dusty knew that he was going to get stooged off for messing around in Andy Warhol's diary years later.
You know what? He's sitting there. He's like, I wonder what's going on. I know what I'll do. I request a girl.
Yeah.
I would like a girl right now, please.
Is the lady here?
And they found one.
Chance?
And they had one. That's the other funny thing. He requested a girl and they had one ready to go.
Well, you never know when you might need one.
At the Sheridan.
At the Sheridan. That's where they usually hang around.
Well, luckily, Andy Warhol got picked up by Tom Sullivan in this tale. And luckily, Tom Sullivan's car was working, but if there was a problem with Tom Sullivan's car and they couldn't get the American Dream and his woman to the Sheridan, maybe they should call someone or get in touch with someone for the best auto parts.
Well, you don't have to call anymore, Brian. That's old-fashioned. That's old school. You don't have to pick up the phone. Now all you got to do is log on to the interwebs, the World Wide Net, and you go right to rockauto.com. That's what you should have been doing. Your car wouldn't be shaking and shimmering and vibrating like a dog pooping peach seeds if you do the maintenance and you'd replace these things in a timely fashion, whether it's a crankshaft manipulator or whether it's the grease that makes sure that your thermostat goes through to the circuit box correctly. All these things and more are available at rockauto.com, no matter what make or model of car that you have, no matter what year. You got a 1929 Wombat? Hey, well, actually, you might be fucked. But if you've got anything still drivable, chances are that rockauto.com has the part that you need, from engine parts to simple things like carpet and even draperies. And my God, you ought to see the incredible napkin sets that they have. And you can set your entire dinner table. But that's, nevertheless, the main thing you want from rockauto.com is auto parts. And you go to that website, their catalog is unique and easy to navigate, no matter what type of motorized conveyance that you are trying to outfit. Whether you mentioned ferries, whether it be a ferry boat, whether it's ferry you across the Mersey, or whether it be a car, a truck, a unicycle, a bicycle, a tricycle, a motorcycle, a tank, an amphibious submarine vehicle, whatever the case. You navigate this website, you pick your part, you choose the brand, you choose the specification, you choose the prices you prefer. You can't choose whether to pay for them or not. That's mandatory. And they'll send them right to you, the same prices for professionals as well as do-it-yourselfers. And folks, why spend up to twice as much for the same parts that you're not going to be able to figure out how to put on your car? You can get them from Rock Auto for much less and still screw the whole thing up. And when you go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck, even if they're ones you don't need, get them. You might need them in the future. And write JCE in their "How did you hear about us" box, just so we look good. You'll get nothing but satisfied with the high quality and low prices at rockauto.com. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need, and then some. People often have parts left over when they finish fixing their car. In that case, just put them in a box. Your neighbor might ask for them later. rockauto.com.
Well, Jim, let's rock on with this show here with that awful transition. Let's rock on with the drive-thru.
Rock on with the show.
Jim, let's go to Twitter for this next one. This was sent on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Elliot Oshansky. Jim, did you actually submit this recipe? And is there actually a story about you, Jim Ross, Whataburger, and Steak and Shake? And he has put here a picture.
It's from Jim Ross's. Can you smell the cooking or smell the food, or what was can you smell the heat? A WWF cookbook from the late 90s.
It has the recipe for Jim Cornette's Kentucky corned beef sandwiches.
Yeah, no, I've never. He just wanted to put something with my name in it. Jim Ross wrote it. I'm not mad at JR, but I've never in my life made a corned beef sandwich. I've eaten a few, but I don't know how to make them, and that's not my recipe. Just somehow, there was a recipe he liked, and I got credit for it, I guess. But no, it's not my, because I've given a lot of my recipes, and nobody asked me about my super duper world famous meatloaf or my incredible spaghetti sauce or my delectable fried fish or obviously the star of our show, the world famous cheeseburgers. No, I got corned beef.
But to be fair, your world famous cheeseburgers, you're not constructing the burger. You're just buying someone else's patty.
No, I make burgers that are better than anything that you can purchase out in public, but I can't do that on the road because I'm not home, which is why I hated being on the road. But also that's why all the road stories about the cheeseburgers having to be constructed specifically to my orders, because I'm trying to recreate what that I would do at home in a lesser fashion because I'm on the road. But there's been a bunch of, times that I have been with JR to a Wendy's or a Whataburger or a Steak and Shake. I don't know what the specific story is that they are referencing there, but Whataburger's famous with all the boys and they had Whataburgers in Florida during the period of time that I was down there in the late 2000 aughts or whatever they call them. And they pulled all the Whataburgers out of Florida. Me and Mike Tenay, Don West, and several of the boys went to a Whataburger for have a big blowout the last night they were open in Florida. This was 12, 13 years ago now. But Whataburger is what a burger should be down in the state of Texas.
What's the secret to your burger? What makes your hamburger so special?
Because I put plenty of meat in them and plenty of cheese on them and season them just right and have the whole thing laid at no. Obviously, if you know the lyrics by heart to the Cult of Meat with Extra Cheese, you'll know there'll be no mustard, no ketchup, and none of those goddamn off-brand pickles that Wendy's changed to instead of the dill pickles. What are they? The bread and butter pickle, the sweet pickle? Fuck those pickles. You only get the good ingredients, and sometimes with bacon, when I feel like messing another pan up.
All right.
Does that answer your question about my corned beef?
It certainly answered something. Let's move on to something we haven't done in a while, Jim. Guess the program. I'm going to hit you with some classic wrestling programs, and you have to figure out when they're from and where they're from.
That's right. That's the rules of this. We already know why you're doing this, because the questions suck.
Doing this because it's something that we will have fun with, something the listeners will enjoy, and something that hopefully will put you in a good mood. Let's go to this first one. I'm opening it here.
Corned beef doesn't do the job. Not unless it's from, what's that place? The deli in New York now. They closed it.
Well, you used to like the Carnegie
deli. I like
to
to go to the Carnegie. If it's corned beef from the Carnegie, that'll put me in a good mood.
All right, tell me when and where this card is from, Jim.
Okay, I'm concentrating now. I'm even going to take notes.
Preliminary matches. Don Fields versus Gene Corsica.
Corsica Gene.
I know, but it says here Gene Corsica, so I'm reading it the way it has it here.
Okay.
Millie Stafford versus China Mira. A 10-minute intermission where lucky numbers will be announced. And then we have two main events. Farmer Jones versus Anton Leone, 2 out of 3 falls. And also 2 out of 3 falls, a mixed tag team match. China Mira, Chris Tolis, and Don Fields versus Millie Stafford and the Corsica brothers.
Okay. One would suspectify that because the Fields brothers were involved, it would be in Alabama. One would suspect that. And the Corsica brothers, it could be Tennessee or Alabama, or potentially Chris Tolos is a wild card there, but I seem to remember that Chris Tolos would have worked down south in the late 50s, early 60s. Anton Leone was all over the place at various points. Of course, he was famous for setting up an independent or outlaw promotion in California in the 80s, but this is no more recent than 1965. I've still, unless it was Louisiana, close to Alabama, or in one of the periods of time where one of the Fuller family or Welch family was in charge of the booking of Louisiana, I'm still going to put this in Alabama, and I'm going to say the period of time was between 1959 and 1963.
The date? Monday night, September 2nd, 1957.
Shit!
Memphis, Tennessee.
Memphis! Son of a bitch!
And an interesting note here on this program, on the back page, page 4, TV wrestling starts September 7. Television wrestling returns to Memphis on Saturday night, September 7 on Channel 13. Promoters Mickey Barnes, Nick Goulas, and Roy Welch have planned matches each week for the enjoyment of you fans. There is no charge for admission. However, a limited number of seats make it necessary for you to secure your tickets in advance. All you have to do is send a self-addressed stamped envelope to promoter Mickey Barnes in care of the Chisca? The Chisca Hotel?
Spell it.
Chisca.
Son of a bitch, I get it. They didn't last there long.
The Chisca Hotel, Memphis. You will receive your tickets by return mail with a date stamped as to what night they will be honored, but you will get your tickets. With this new live TV wrestling card, it enables fans to see wrestling 2 times a week, once for free. So send your orders in now, no cost to you, no obligation, and the TV card for Saturday, September 7th, Millie Stafford versus Kathy Branch, and Les Welch versus Pat Malone.
Wow.
In parentheses, Black Bat.
Because he worked in Memphis instead of the Green Shadow at one time, he was the Black Bat.
Yeah.
But by the way, Kathy Branch married Tom Renesto and was the
Tom Branch.
Mother of Tom Branch, Tom Renesto Jr., and Speedy Talltree was his brother. Well, now I'm embarrassed, now we know the exact date of the restart of Memphis television in 1957, and Roy had just picked the town up. Mickey Barnes was the local promoter. They'd used him in Kingsport and in other places. And the Corsica brothers make sense, and I just didn't identify that as a Memphis card because that was, at the spot show card. That's why Les Wolf's promotion wasn't doing well in the 50s. It was, a tag team match and fucking a girls match out of that and a couple of singles. But I'm embarrassed. Okay, I've lost that one.
For our next program, let me open this up to get the card.
Standing by.
Special event, Paul Jones versus Dick Daviscourt.
Ooh.
Also in a jiu-jitsu match, Jack Roller versus Kazuo Yashimi. And the main event, 2 out of 3 falls, Joe Malkowitz versus Ed Strangler Lewis.
Jesus Christ. We're in the late 30s, early 40s.
Well, hold on, because this is a long time ago. Let me see if there's any clue I can give you from this that wouldn't give anything away. Fire notice.
Fire, we just invented it?
All right, I'm gonna give you one clue. Joe Stecker, former World's Wrestling Champion who retired voluntarily from the mat game following his defeat at the hands of champion Ed Strangle Lewis in St. Louis February 20th, is ready to start a comeback that may regain him the title.
But without giving a city, what's the name of the arena this is being held in?
That's going to give it all away, but I'll do it anyway.
Well, you don't have to say the New York Madison Square Garden. I guess that's
okay.
An example.
I'm not going to say it's the Los Angeles Olympic Auditorium, but it's a building known as the Olympic Auditorium.
Bastard. Well, I just said, all right, you didn't have to be a smart aleck.
If I said, I could have said the Olympic now that I think about it.
I'm still working on I can't remember the year of Lewis and Stecker, but we're in the late 30s, right?
No. We're in the
into
late
the
20s.
40s?
We're in the
late 20s. Okay. In that case, I'm going to say 28.
Very good. December 19th, 1928, Lou Darrow, the promoter, Olympic Auditorium.
Carnation Lou Darrow. At first, when you mentioned Paul Jones, obviously that's not the Paul Jones from Crockett. That's the Paul Jones that was the Atlanta promoter and owned pretty much of the office for all those years. Obviously, Joe Malkowitz went on to become the promoter in San Francisco years later, but Los Angeles, 1928. I would have thought we were in the 30s, but I didn't know Dick Davis Court was that old. I didn't know Jiu-Jitsu was that old.
Let's go to our next program here, Jim. Let me open this one up. An interesting card. Let's see if you get this. Tommy Gilbert and Eddie Marlin versus Terry Garvin and Jim Garvin. Ron Garvin versus Jerry Jarrett. Don Green and Bearcat Brown versus the Fabulous Kangaroos with Sir Clements. This is, let me read this. A return explosive tag battle. Falls count on the floor, in the aisle, in the ring, and anywhere in the building. No time limit, no disqualification. And the main event?
That's a Nick Gula stipulation all over the place.
The Interns, with manager Dr. Ken Ramey, versus Randy Curtis and Lorenzo Parenti. No DQ. One of the interns will wear a different colored jersey.
That's because they used to switch, because they were all in white and they were indistinguishable. So they would switch, to prevent them from, they did it with the Von Brauners also. They would make one member of the team wear a different color.
And
it's not.
And three Garvins, including Ron Garvin versus Jerry Jarrett.
Yes, all three of the Garvin. This is 1973. I can tell. Am I right about that?
November 6, 1973.
Okay. And I mean, are you throwing me another Memphis? Because that could have been a Memphis card, or it could be Nashville, Birmingham.
Ding, 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 Birmingham.
Okay, there you go, Birmingham, Alabama.
I thought Jerry Jarrett would have been the thing that could have thrown you off and made you think it was Memphis.
Well, no, just because in 1973, he was working the full territory because he was one of the top baby faces.
I didn't realize he was going to the Alabama towns.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, he couldn't be in two places the same night. They were running more than one town a night, but no, he was working everywhere. He was one of the top baby faces. And especially if that's a night that they weren't running Memphis on the same night, if Memphis was switched or whatever. But also, the Kangaroos were a top heel team in the territory at that time. Don Green and Bearcat Brown were huge baby faces. Tommy Gilbert and Eddie Marlin were the Rock and Roll Express of the time, in that they were the team, even though Eddie was in his 40s, Tommy was 10 or 12 years younger and looked kind of like Burt Reynolds with the mustache and the cowboy hat and everything. So they had the girls loving them. The Garvins were a heck of a heel team, but Jimmy was the manager at this point of Ron and Terry Garvin. And they would make Jimmy wrestle every once in a while because he had just turned, I think, 18 or 19 the year before and gone on the road with him. And he wasn't a full-fledged wrestler yet. And the big thing is the interns were one of the top heel teams that ever appeared in the Tennessee territory. But Randy Curtis and Lorenzo Parenti were a team that they just tried to push out of nowhere. They did the same thing in Louisville for about a month, putting them in main events. And then for whatever reason, it was over with. And you never saw Randy Curtis again. Lorenzo Parenti was around for a while because he had been around for ages. But I knew that had to be the Tennessee territory. It was just a question of what town it was in.
All right, here's our next one. The referees are Otto Kuss and Ray Gunkel. Cyclone Anaya versus Jack O'Reilly. Steve Stanley versus Jim LaRock. Ramon Torres versus Tony Martin. Gentleman Ed Francis, and I believe this would be after, I shouldn't give anything away, but I already did it. This would be after he was the World Junior Heavyweight Champion, I believe, versus Gene Kelly. Duke Kiamuka versus Danny Bulldog Pletchus. And the main event, Buddy Rogers versus Iron Mike.
Ooh, okay. Is that DiBiase?
It is DiBiase, although for the record in the program, the name DiBiase is never listed once, just Iron Mike.
Boy, you got a potpourri there. Ed Francis would be most known for the promotion in Hawaii, but he was a wrestler before that. Gene Kelly was noted for Singing in the Rain. Duke Kiamoka would have been huge in Florida, but I was about to say, you've just said the referees were Otto Kuss and who?
Ray Gunkel.
And Ray Gunkel. Otto Kuss would have been a referee in Texas. Ray Gunkel would later at least become the all-time top babyface of the 60s in Atlanta. You've got Buddy Rogers, who everywhere. Mike DiBiase would have been facing Buddy Rogers primarily in the Southwest, one would think. But there is Jim LaRock, who was a top babyface in the Evansville, Indiana area in 1959, 1960. Jesus Christ. This has got to be between, one would think, 1959 and 1962. And I'm going to say it's in Texas. I don't know why, except for Otto Kuss never went anywhere else, did he? I don't know why Ray Gunkel would be refereeing there.
It is from the Dallas Sportatorium.
Okay.
July 3rd, 1956.
I wouldn't have said that early. A little bit earlier than I would have said.
Well, one of the giveaways...
Steamrollered me.
One of the giveaways you didn't pick up on, Gene Kelly, was Gene Kiniski.
Ah, shit, that's right.
And here's something interesting here.
That's right.
New air cooling in tonight, which I thought would be interesting considering you were there and 20 years later, 30 years later, and there was no air conditioning.
Not a bit of it. Now, the air cooling in the locker room was a fucking big fan. So I've never, maybe they left the door to the refrigerator at the concession stand open.
All right, two more.
Give me some more. Give me something.
This one here is an interesting program. Return grudge battle, Mike Padusis versus Doug Lindsay.
Ooh.
Sandor Kovac and Steve Kovac versus Mephisto and Dante. And the main event, a 5-girl Wrestle Royal, Miss Cora Combs, Miss Dorothy Carter, Miss Ann Casey, Miss Kay Noble, and Miss Barbara Galento. There will also be 2 other girl matches as paired off from the Wrestle Royal.
That is going to be... Mike Padusis played football for the University of Tennessee and wrestled in from the 50s through maybe the early 70s. Doug Lindsay was later known as Doug Gilbert. For the 70s WWF fans, Gas House Gilbert. He was also Doug Gilbert, the masked professional. Mephisto and Dante could have been anybody. It could be, if this was 1972, it could be Dennis Condrey is one of them. But there was a number. Steve Kovac was also Stephen Little Bear. Steve Kovac was big on top for Nick Goulas in the 60s and 70s. Sandor Kovac. Could that be the Sandor Kovac?
I'm not certain, and I want to say.
I bet not, because with the 5-girl Wrestle Royal and Barbara Galento being involved, as well as Cora Combs, that tells me this is a Nick Goulas and Roy Welch production. And I'm going to say it's from a small town either in East Tennessee or potentially Western Virginia. And I'm going to say that it was somewhere between 1962 and 1966.
Pretty good. It's Birmingham again, although not
Birmingham
a small town.
again, son of a gun.
But January 17th, 1962.
Okay, I'm not as good on my Birmingham as I should be, but that seems like a small card for Birmingham.
It happened last week. Jumping Joe Dillman and Bob Holland handled the duties as referee in last Monday night's Wild and Woolly Pro Wrestling at the City Auditorium.
See, if you'd have told me Bob Holland was one of the referees, I'd have got it.
Lively action saw Jackie Fargo beat Johnny Apollo. Doug Lindsay came out over Big Don Rocky Lee. Canadian brothers Sandor and Steve Kovac won over Johnny Costas and Pedro Zapata. And Mike Pedusas down Big Tiny Smith.
You know who Big Tiny Smith is, don't you?
Is that Grizzly Smith?
That's Grizzly.
He was working for Roy and Nick?
He worked in the early 60s, a 7-foot tall guy worked for everybody.
Where'd they go? Fans ask many times where their favorites have gone. Here are the latest on a few. Tommy O'Toole's in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada, as is Reggie Parks. Mr. Moto's in Los Angeles, California. Howard Martin is in Cleveland, Ohio. Larry Shane is in Detroit, Michigan. And finally, Dick Beyer is in Buffalo, New York. And we have one last program here, Jim. Now, there's no way you would ever get this one, so we're just going to talk about the program.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to give you the card. Let's see if
Just let's see what happens. See how close I can get.
All right, I was going to talk about the program, and we'll see.
We'll still talk about it, your big program there.
All right, here's the, here's all that's listed. The main event, 6-man tag match, 2 out of 3 falls, 60-minute time limit. Von Bronner, Patty Mack, and Chico Cortez versus Nature Boy, Carl Linich, and Billy Sharpert.
What is this? Now, is this a Jack Pfeffer deal? And I have no idea. Those are not normal people. So you were right. I have no idea what's going on. Those are not normal people.
This is Volume 2, Number 35, November 7th, 1956, the Bowling Green Wrestling Journal. Devoted exclusively to wrestling, the only year-round sport.
Bowling Green, Kentucky?
Bowling Green, Kentucky. This program is for the first Kentucky 1-cent sale. 6-man tag went... That's interesting. I didn't even think about that. 1956, they're calling it a 6-man tag in the program.
What else would they call it?
Well, no, because people are now arguing that it was called Trios before it was called 6-man tag match.
No, it wasn't. Just in Mexico.
Just in Mexico. But here it is here in 1956 in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And the promoter, hold on, that is certainly not any Nature Boy I've ever seen.
Well, it's not Nick and Roy. It's an outlaw group. Because Bowling Green is only 60 miles from Nashville. So Bowling Green was a town that Nick ran every week for 25 or 30 years, probably.
Promoter and matchmaker Joe Marshall. S. Rush Nicholson, State Athletic Commission. Kenneth Marshall's the publisher of this program here, and they're operating out of the Helm Hotel. And the Yeah, I guess just a home hotel.
And that, that used to be a deal that wrestling offices would be in hotels, anything from the Holland Hotel in New York being where Skolin and Gorilla and all of those guys would, play cards and give out the free tickets and the press passes, to Nick and Roy made a career of having their offices in different hotels, the Sam Davis Hotel or in Nashville or wherever the case, because in those days you could rent rooms in those old downtown hotels on a monthly basis and set up an office, and the wrestling fans didn't have anybody's personal address, so they couldn't track you down. I don't know who all those people were, though.
What year did the Von Brauners start?
Start wrestling?
Yeah.
I don't know what year each one of them individually started as a rookie before they became the Von Brauners.
Because when I see a guy listed here as Von Brauner, and it's spelled Brawner, and now I see his full name here, Johann Von Brauner.
Well, but you know what? The Kurt and Carl Von Brauner, which one of them was named Jimmy Brauner, and it was spelled that way, Brawner. That may have been him as a rookie, because the team of the Von Brauners, I think, got together, 59-ish, 60-ish, and with Gentleman Saul, and they were together for about 10 or 12 years in Florida, California, Tennessee, etc., all over the place.
You see that? Fun with Guest the Program, and there it is, another edition. We'll do this again soon. Good time?
Well, yeah, it's just you keep throwing me swerves and curves there. When you go back to Birmingham twice, you're double dipping in Birmingham. See, that threw me off. That wasn't fair. I call foul.
All right, well, we'll see if we're fair next time, but if you're calling foul long enough, and if you're calling
foul funk,
if you're calling foul loud enough, I may get a little upset. I don't think there was any foul in any way, and I think there's evidence here on this audio recording. I may sue.
I've got a gripe. I may sue. I say that you fouled me, and that you did not go by the rules according to Hoyle, as they say, and now I may have to file a suit, and I know exactly who, if I want to sue you, you suit-wearing son of a gun, this is the guy that I'll call.
Call Stephen P. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. Those are the rest.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you know who it is. Stephen P. New. You know how to call him. 888-692-8084. You know how to write him or get a hold of him on the internet, newlawoffice.com. And you know all about him because we've talked about him for years and years. We've talked about all the settlements. Just last week on the program, how many tens and hundreds of millions of dollars did we say that he has gotten in settlements in various cases over the past 20-something years for people not only in his home state of West Virginia, but all across the country? We mentioned that. We mentioned the types of suits, anything from the babies born addicted to opioids to the poisoned groundwater to the various ways that big government and big companies and big corporations and greedy, avaricious people infringe and impinge on the little guy. And we talked about how much he does for the people, that he's one of the number one rated philatelists in all of West Virginia. He gives money to he's a philatelist. He gives money to the needy, to the sick. That's what I said, a philatelist. He practices philately. He's one of the most proficient philatelists in all of West Virginia.
It sounds filthy. I don't know what you're saying. It sounds...
Oh, no, wait a minute. Philanthropy is when you give money. Philatelist, you know what a philatelist is, don't you, that practices philately?
No, I don't know.
A stamp collector.
Ah.
And that's what Stephen does in his spare time after he helps people. He goes home and he takes a pair of those tweezers and he holds up a 1916 upside-down loogie stamp from the Isle of Latvia, and he puts it in his album, and he says, there, I've just made another $1 million.
The Isle of Latvia?
The Isle of Latvia.
Interesting.
But, folks, you can have West Virginia's premier philatelist on your side and in your corner, even though he gives money to children's sports teams and he gives money to various charities to feed homeless people. He's always wanting to help somebody, and he can help you out. So if you need to go to court, or if you're being taken to court, or if you want to take somebody to court, or just anything to do with court, then you call Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084, newlawoffice.com. Get even with Stephen. He's a philatelist.
He's a philanthropist and a wonderful man, and I don't know anything about a stamp collection, but call him today if you need his help, Stephen P. New.
And he's got comic books, too.
Leave those alone. Jim, before I mention the Dusty Rhodes and the Warhol Diaries, I want to give credit to the person who sent it in, Ashley from Birmingham, England. I missed out on doing that before. So thank you, Ashley. Let's get our next question here, Jim.
At least she wasn't from Birmingham, Alabama. I'm starting to wonder about you in Birmingham.
This next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Jeremy in Minneapolis. This week, some of the fired members of WWE struck back at their former employer. It all started when the former Ember Moon, now going by Athena Page, accused WWE, and especially NXT, of specific meetings for the women on the roster to dress sexier. Athena stated, quote, I'm not about to wear fishnet booty butt cheek shorts because we had a 2-hour meetings about how to dress like Mandy Rose. Let me stop right there because there's more here. Any thoughts on that? That they're meeting with the girls and telling them to dress like Mandy Rose?
Well, now, first of all, what Ember Moon's name is now what?
Athena Page.
That may be the only time that one of the wrestlers has picked their own name, and it's not as good as the one that the WWE picked. I think Ember Moon sounds better than Athena Page, but nevertheless, I've seen Ember Moon's ass. She shouldn't be wearing the fishnet fucking booty shorts.
Oh, will you stop it? We're talking about the merits of the discussion here, not...
if you've got a fishnet booty short ass, I don't see any problem with people, if you're on television, and asking you to put one on. But if you don't have the ass for it, then there would be an issue. I mean, what? By God, there's hunger, there's war in Ukraine, there's people sleeping in the streets, there's sick children and homeless animals. So I don't give two French fried titty fucks what kind of meeting they have with the girls, telling them to wear what. It matters not to me. I don't care. They're all making hundreds of thousands of dollars and they're on television. And they all apparently have a plastic surgeon on speed dial. So if they're just now figuring out that they ought to show a little busty and booty on television when that's primarily what many of them have been picked for their position for, because it sure ain't wrestling ability, then I don't know why we're so shocked. This is not an earth-shattering occurrence, in my opinion. If I was the talent, I would have been more pissed about the meeting that they canceled and said they were going to reschedule about 8 or 10 years ago about how they were going to pay royalties off the network than be upset about a meeting where somebody said, hey, girls, dress a little sexier and show the tickets out front. They've been doing the same thing in the business for 50 years. Nothing changes. It's not any different.
This started
if they wanted to dress like nuns, they should join a convent.
Or create a nun gimmick. We haven't had that yet.
Oh, yes, we did. Don't you remember the flying nuns on Shotgun Saturday Night? It was the poor headbangers. I thought they were doomed from the start.
Let me go back to this email here. This started a chain reaction where the former Nia Jax, now under her real name, Lena Fanine, she tweeted, quote, it's a shame. Some people deserve to get the opportunity to shine like the star they really are, but unfortunately, certain higher-ups can never see past their own perverted ways. Too bad. There aren't the lucky... What? Too bad. There aren't the lucky ones who can use blackmail to keep their jobs. This led to the third member of the chain reaction.
Well, wait a minute. Hold on now. Let's talk about Nia Myhole for a second. can we all agree that nobody ever asked her to put on any fishnet booty shorts? So she just apparently, she thinks the higher-ups are perverted because they want the girls to wear the fishnet booty shorts. She's the same one that didn't want to get vaccinated because God would take care of her. And I think she's fairly right-wing and probably highly religious, and as such probably thinks that everybody in the world is a pervert. So, but Jesus Christ, this is what passes for a fucking controversial issue now amongst these people.
This led to the third member of the chain reaction.
Oh, boy.
As Road Dogg, a.k.a. Brian James.
Now, wait a minute. I know for a stone cold dadgum fact that nobody has ever asked Road Dogg to wear any fucking fishnet booty shorts.
I don't know. He was working for Russo for a while in TNA, but let's get back to what it says here. A.k.a. Brian James, who also got fired from his producing role in NXT. He claimed, quote, "Girl, you had me at it's a shame." He also knows exactly who's to blame for this change. All of them are pointing the finger at Johnny Ace, being the dirty old man that wanted to see more skin. It has been reported that Johnny Ace would like a return to the Divas era to WWE, with revealing outfits, bikini contests, and 3-minute matches instead of the current Women's Revolution era. He did take creative control after Triple H was pushed aside to make these changes on NXT 2.0, and it appears that it's expanding to Raw and SmackDown. Is Johnny Ace a perverted old man? Did he ever show signs of this in the past, when he was a terrible wrestler on WCW? Or is he just doing the bidding of Vince? Will this create a conflict of interest with Stephanie and the established women on the roster that have no desires to return to the Divas era? Finally, do you have any idea how this idiot Johnny Ace hasn't been fired? Does he actually have blackmail against Vince to keep his job? Like Charlie from Starkville has blackmail on Brian to always get his questions on the show? Or is Johnny Ace one of the lizard people that must be defeated by the Code Academy army? And there it is, people pointing the finger at Johnny Ace. So,
oh, God.
Thoughts about all of this, Jim?
Well, there's a lot of questions there. First of all, no, I wouldn't call Johnny Ace a pervert. I would call Johnny Ace the fucking clueless putz that they put in charge of talent relations because he would agree with everything that Stephanie said, and he looked good in a suit, and he liked to smile and go to meetings. We've talked about this for years. JR would tell the creative team what he thought about their shit, and Johnny Ace wouldn't. That's why Stephanie said when this was 15 years ago, we finally have a head of talent relations that'll work for the creative team instead of against them. Because Johnny wasn't going to say anything about their shitty creative because he likes being a corporate employee and wearing suits and smiling and saying yes. And he likes sports entertainment. And he likes anything that Vince likes. And that was the downfall of developmental in OVW because I couldn't put up with his shit. They ran me off. And he ended up, succeeding in the mission to move everything to Florida so that all the retired wrestlers and ex-wrestlers that were his friends and prospective agents wouldn't have to move. Part of that, as we've talked about many times, was that he was hiring the girls out of lingerie catalogs and bikini catalogs. And he'd see ones he liked and he'd find out they had an agent. Of course they did. And they'd sign them or give them tryouts, and the girls would pass out doing drills where they hit the ropes because they probably hadn't eaten in a week and a half. And so we've got to the point where there's never any just right. The porridge is always too hot or too cold in wrestling. So instead of saying, hey, we're going to find 3 or 4 really talented girls that we're going to build around, and we're going to have good girls matches, and they're going to be about 15 or 20% of them as relates to the whole fucking ratio of actual matches entirely. Nobody's going to do that. They're either going to open up a goddamn women's division where it's 50-50, and for every guy's match, you have to have a girls' match. And the girls get to have all the stipulations that the guys do, and the girls get to take all the stupid bumps the guys do. Or, like Johnny Ace, and that's what he likes, is 3-minute matches with girls getting their shit ripped off and flinging their fucking titties around, because he's of the same arrested development that the two Vinces were, and that's all he likes. So we're never going to get it in the middle where it could be just right, and you could have a couple of female wrestlers in your company that made wrestling seem like it was a goddamn sport instead of a fucking fiasco. We're either going to have half and half, whether they deserve to be on the show or not, or Johnny Ace is going to find strippers with silicone that like to fucking wear duct tape. One or the other. You pick which one you like.
Well, we'll see which one the public likes as I guess we get going with this. Jim, here's our next question. Sent to CornyDriveThru.
Yes, Brian, here's my next answer.
Sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com. This is from Sam in South Africa. Good day,
Some
Jim and what?
Some of what?
No, Sam. S-O-M.
Oh, just not some, but Sam.
Sam.
All right. Well, what does Sam say?
Well, it's not a somber email. Let's get to the question here. Good day, Jim and Brian. Hope you're both doing all right. I recently remembered that The Rock's daughter, Simone Johnson, had been training at the WWE Performance Center for a while. However, she is yet to debut or even be mentioned on any WWE programming. I think she signed around the same time as Rex Steiner, aka Braun Breaker, for those of you kids out there. From your experience, Jim, is there any difference in the way you train someone who has a parent who is a famous, accomplished name in the wrestling business? And do you think they are taking longer with her because of that reason? Would Jim have trained someone like Randy Orton any differently had he not been a third-generation wrestler? And the subject line here, Jim, was training a second-generation wrestler. So how is that different from training someone with no family wrestling background whatsoever?
Well, I don't think you train anybody any different because they come from a wrestling family. I think the advantage that somebody has that comes from a wrestling family is that they've grown up around it. They've heard it talked about it. Well, if they've been in that parent's life, they've heard about it. They've talked about it at home. They've seen more of it. They have a more fully rounded understanding of what it's supposed to be and what it is, rather than somebody's just walked in off the street, or these days now that's read about it only on the internet and as a result has gotten a significant portion of everything about the wrestling business wrong because they've read about it on the internet. And it's worse when you think you know the correct story and you don't really, and you don't know that you don't know the shit that's right. So having a parent or some family member precede you in the business can help weed some of that out, but you don't train anybody differently. It's just that gives them maybe a little bit more mental aptitude to pick up what you're talking about. As far as, like with Orton, he was a third generation wrestler. He probably had never seen his well, let me try to do the math here. He'd never seen his grandfather wrestle except for if there was film or, a few things that he might have seen. But I'm sure he saw a good bit of his dad. And especially when he was, under 10 years old. So that registers in your mind, and you probably want to do a few things like your father or whatever. But at the same time, everybody's going to be different. And Orton, Randy, is so much more, I guess, of a well-rounded athlete than Bob Orton Jr. was. Bob was an amazing worker, and he was in good wrestling shape, but he didn't have a great physique. Randy does. He didn't come off the top rope very much, if at all, with anything, but Randy does.
Well, superplex.
Well, I'm talking about jumping off flying cross bodies and these missile drop kicks and all that shit. Superplex coming off, you're not coming off the top. You got your feet firmly on the second rope and you're dropping that other motherfucker off the top. But I'm just saying that the second generation guys and third generation guys are usually end up being a better athlete than their father was because of training methods and just progress. But it's not often that a guy ends up being the worker that his father was. And Randy has made a great fucking career for himself. I still don't know, even as good as he is, that if he was recognized in his field at his time as good in the ring as Bob Orton Jr. was during his time. Jeff Jarrett, be honest, Jeff, not only a better athlete, but a better worker than Jerry was. Jerry's work was all mental. His physical work was nothing to write home about. It didn't need to be 50 years ago. So, what were the other questions asked within the body of that?
Well, you kind of covered a lot of it, but let me ask you this in terms of training wrestlers or training guys to be wrestlers who have a family background in wrestling. Have you had instances where it goes the other way, where the fact that they grew up around the business was a detriment and it was hard to train them or get through to them or get them to do things differently?
Well, no, not that. There have been, and we've all seen the second generations that just didn't work out. I don't remember anybody that particularly was looked at or viewed wrestling in a screwy way that you had to break them of that kind of bad habit. They just didn't have the talent in the ring to carry it off. And I mean, that's always been the case. Earlier in the show, we talked about Tom Renesto's kids. They sucked. Lynn Rossi was one of the biggest baby faces in the history of Nick Goulas's promotion. His son, Joey, all he had to be was passable, and he would have been a main event guy. He wasn't passable. Poor Bruno, David Sammartino, Bruno Jr. So there's always that, but it's not necessarily that they've learned anything bad that you have to break them from their family. They just they weren't blessed with the personality or the ability.
You also said something interesting before about sometimes, I forget the way you said it, but a second generation wrestler who has a relationship with their family, I think was close to what you said.
No, I'm saying if the younger person was in the parent's life at the time. For Brian Pillman Jr. is a second generation wrestler, but through unfortunate circumstances, most of his life he grew up without his dad, obviously. So there was nobody in the family to be talking about the inside of wrestling to him in that respect. And then there's been other situations where a son of a wrestler would get involved in the business, even though there was a breakup early on and the mother might have raised that kid. And, so he wasn't around constantly. It wasn't like his dad was taking him to the matches. So it just depends on, what was the father still active in the business, or was he received? When Dusty had Dustin, he was still on top. But when Dusty had Cody, he had transitioned already to, more of a backstage role. So you're still growing up with the guy, but you're getting two different attitudes, two different viewpoints from a guy who's on top in wrestling and then a guy who's transitioned, and you don't get to go out and see him work every night. You get to see the stuff that he has produced. It's knowledge, but it's still different.
Was it like a given that Lawler, Dundee, and Jarrett will all have their kids get into wrestling? Or, was there a point where you thought, wow, these guys are going to all have their kids in wrestling? Or was it a surprise in any of these cases to you?
Well, when I was there, it would have been a surprise in everybody's case, because Dundee's kid, Lawler's kid, and Jarrett's kid, when I was photographer and or working the territory, was between 5 and 12 years old. So it would have been a surprise for all of them. But obviously the way it transpired, it's no surprise because those guys had homesteaded that territory. And because of obviously Jarrett was owner, then Lawler became part owner. Dundee was figured in as long as he wanted to be there because of his relationship with Jarrett and the fact that he was, on the all-time Mount Rushmore of box office attractions in the territory. With Jarrett, when Jeff came along, it was natural. That Jarrett would want his son to follow in his footsteps, and with the eventual thought, I'm sure, of owning and running the territory. And Jeff, had already been a high school athlete, and of course he turns pro when he's 18, so there's not even any college. They didn't wait for college in wrestling back in those days. With Lawler, I think Brian was a little bit shorter, but at the same time, even though he didn't have the size, he had more of the personality because Jeff, when he was younger, it took a while for the personality bulb to come on. So Brian was, a personality from the start, and he took to the promo aspect and the showbiz aspect. I think the biggest surprise was Dundee with Jamie because Jamie was both so small, so skinny, and ended up he could work his ass off. He might have been the best worker, straight and focused, of all of them just in the ring with all the stuff he could do. But between the size and then the fact that he became a lunatic and, alienated a lot of people, he had probably the third most successful career out of those three people. But with them being there, their fathers being in the business, in the office, ownership, or highly, of high repute with the fans in that area, it's no surprise that they wanted to follow in their dad's footsteps, nor were they given the chance, because if Jarrett knew if any of the three of them clicked, that would be better for the business there. And he didn't care whether, I don't think Lawler's son or Dundee's son ever went anywhere else. I'm sure he had aspirations for Jeff, but it's not a surprise. It ends up being kind of ironic that Jeff ended up being the most successful one overall because he's the only one that ended up really following in his father's footsteps and getting into management and promotion.
All right, Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from David Robertson Joliet. From David Robertson in Joliet, Illinois. He just has
I thought his full name was David Robertson Joliet.
So did I, the way he wrote it here. Jim, since you were always known as a rich mama's boy, I was wondering if any conniving gold diggers ever tried to weasel you out of your money, thinking you would be an easy target. Any stories of gold diggers in pro wrestling would be interesting if you have any.
Oh my gosh. I have had probably hundreds of gold diggers weasel me out of $100 to $150 at a time periodically over my life. But no. I mean, number one, I would have had to have had time. As Thunderbolt Patterson said, if we only had time. I have been lucky that I have had, since I was, let's see, hold on, let me go back and do math. In the last, my adult life, in the last 37 or 8 years, let's say, since I turned 21, I've had basically 3 long-term relationships and a variety of friends and neighbors. But nothing was ever... What are you laughing at?
A variety of friends and neighbors.
I'm a friendly person. I like to associate with people. But nothing ever got in any way serious enough that there was the thought of money changing hands or somebody trying to set themselves up, except for the people that we got into our situation with that everybody knew what was happening ahead of time. So no, I've fortunately stayed away from the painted floozies that would try to take me for my millions and millions of dollars.
Well, if I could ask you a question about these floozies that you mentioned.
Now, there were maybe a few of these floozies that I led to believe I had quite a bit of money on hand, and they might have been wondering where I went to by the next day, but I never promised any of them I was going to give any of it to them.
When wrestling got real big on cable TV, especially as the 80s went on, and wrestling became a big thing culturally, although a lot of that was WWE, obviously Crockett Promotions had some major years like 86.
Yeah.
Was there ever a change in the kind of women that were showing up to the hotels to be around the wrestlers? Once you see these guys on TV and start thinking they have lots of money, did you see a different caliber of woman start approaching wrestlers, or was it always the same?
Well, what are you trying to be sexist and act like, oh, so the real pretty ones come out now or whatever?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying.
No, it didn't depend on the period of wrestling or how hot it was. A lot of times it depended on the town and or the territory. Some territories had, Florida was noted for incredible, female fans. And so were the Carolinas, because so many of those guys did have money and did like to go out and take, their people that were with them around in limousines and things. Or sometimes it could be that, it was just, you had a shitty town in a particular territory where everybody, male, female, and animal, vegetable, and mineral, was as ugly as a mud fence. Or, whatever the case. So it didn't really, there were more people, but it was the same type of cross section. It was just amplified when business got hot or a territory was doing big business or things in the 80s, all the publicity on television. It was just more of everybody, good, bad, and indifferent.
This next question was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Omar. Hello,
the tent maker.
Hello, Mr. Cornette and Mr. Last. I am a proud, and maybe the only, Cult of Cornette member all the way from Malaysia. I would like to ask your thoughts on throwing the towel in matches. I personally think it is a good way to elevate a story if done correctly. Jim, what do you think of the throwing in the towel being done, or the throwing in the towel being done as a finish for a match?
I will throw in my answer, which is, it's another thing that's great if everybody understands it and gets it and it's set up. Or it's done in such a way that people don't go, what the fuck's going on here? It's done better in a promotion where the style is more sports-like, sports-based presentation, because it's something that everybody can understand. Where did the old saying come from? Well, he threw in the towel. That's because that's a thing that was done in a fight when your corner man had determined that you had enough. He didn't want you to risk more punishment for future injury, whatever the case. Throw the towel in and get the referee's attention. We wave it off. We've done. We're folding our tent. It's over. And that's been used in wrestling a few notable times when they didn't want to beat Backlund, or maybe Backlund didn't want to get beat. Who knows? With the Iron Sheik, so Skolin threw the towel in. If you just did it right now with no setup and out of nowhere, then nobody would get it. And chances are there's enough of these young fans that have just seen chaos wrestling with no fucking rules, parameters, whatever, that they wouldn't understand anything, much less that related to a rule being used or something unusual like that relates to sport and legitimate fighting instead of trampoline wrestling. But if you have a guy who has a corner man who has a legitimate emotional investment in him, is it his son? Is it his protege that he has trained, or is it his best friend's son that he has become his protege, or just some emotional connection, some, Rocky movie Burgess Meredith tie-in in the corner where the guy doesn't want to see his man hurt or injured or whatever. And, then you could potentially do something like that where the fucking heel has done something behind the referee's back that the referee didn't see, but the baby face is hurting, and the corner man in the corner had saw it also, and he knows that his guy's not going to give up. He'll die before he gives up, so he makes the sacrifice to save him for the long run. And I say babyface because, fuck, why would a heel's corner man throw the towel in? Because it just doesn't make sense. So you can do it, but only if you set up the relationship between the towel thrower and towel throwee and manage to build some dramatic spot or incident in the match where everybody understood that this guy wasn't going to quit on his own and he was risking the end of his career if somebody didn't stop it, and the referee is the clueless putz who doesn't realize it needs to be stopped. Then you can get away with it.
All right. Well, I guess we got away with that. Here's our final question this week, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Jake Hammer. In his book Body Slams, longtime ring announcer Gary Michael Capetta talked about the McMahons, both Vince Sr. and Jr. He said that Vince Sr. was a classy man. However, one time Gary asked for a raise, and Vince Sr. said, quote, "I can't afford it," before eventually giving him a bump in pay. Vince Jr. was pretty much buried. Gary said Vince would never acknowledge his presence and was very cold to him. So cold, in fact, that he called him away from the ring one night at the Spectrum in the middle of the card to fire him from future Philadelphia bookings. According to Gary, Vince Jr. took great pleasure in this. Have you ever seen Vince treat fellow wrestlers or employees this way? Or do you think it was a personality conflict between Mr. McMahon and the world's most dangerous ring announcer? Is Vince McMahon a guy who can be completely unapproachable?
Well, there's all kinds of questions all over the place there. Have I ever seen him treat anybody else that way? Yes. I've seen him fire a lot of people and say, I don't like that person. And, and et cetera. He hated Louis Spicoli. Just couldn't stand that drug-addled, because me and Bruce and JR and Vince in Anaheim one day on the way to a taping or a pay-per-view or something passed Candido, Tammy, and Spicoli had already left the company, but we were in California, so he's riding with them to the show to visit. And that's the first I've seen Vince pop over that drug-infested son of a bitch. Spicoli just got under his fucking croft or whatever. I like Gary Capetta. I thought he was an excellent announcer, and he was always respectful around the locker room and got along well with the boys and was a grown adult and never any issues. There were some ring announcers, especially in the WCW TBS days, that might have tried to go out and fucking hoot and holler and cut up like the boys did, but Gary was not one of those. And this
Jones?
was even... Well, no, he was a DJ in town. There's a guy named Tony Gilliam.
Tony Gilliam? That's my next guess.
He liked to go chase around where the boys were and see if he could pick up any of the leftovers. And he was a nice guy, too. But no, Gary's never been a problem or had an issue, and I would have to think that maybe just Vince, for whatever reason, just didn't like Gary Capetta. I don't know why it would be, but it sounds like it. So I have no other insight in that.
Who else did Vince not like, and any other stories of Vince just acting like a complete dick to someone?
Oh, God, I'm not prepared for that, and I'd have to think, and I don't want to unfairly name anyone just off the top of my head, but he didn't do that often. He'd kind of harumph every once in a while and, roll his eyes about people, but he didn't just actively just dislike a lot of people to the point where I don't want to talk about these people.
What about Luger after Luger left?
He wasn't a fan of Lex's after Lex left.
I'm sure there are other examples. That's the only one I
can't think of any right now.
All right. Well, I don't know if we can end on that question. So one last question.
All right.
Last question. Let's get one more here. Let me find one that shouldn't produce too long and difficult an answer.
Yeah.
30 ways Jim Cornette and Tony Khan are alike and unalike. No.
All right. No, we're not going to be doing that.
Jim, here it is. Our last question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Luke in Sydney, Australia. Hi, Jim and Brian. I had some questions about the count-out in pro wrestling that I hope you might be able to shed some light on. In the sport of boxing, when a boxer is knocked through the ropes and out of the ring, they are given a count of 20 to get back in the ring and to their feet, as opposed to the 10 count if they are knocked down inside the ropes. Or else they are declared knocked out. Oh, there's a parenthesis in there. Is this where the wrestling count-out is adapted from? Likewise, in wrestling, if the wrestler doesn't re-enter the ring by the count, is this meant to be considered a knockout or a disqualification for not answering the referee's call? Finally, I noticed New Japan Pro Wrestling uses a 20 count for when the wrestlers leave the ring, but Western promotions use a 10 count. Do you know if there's a particular reason that the count time varies?
Briefly, and hopefully one by one. Obviously, there's a reason. The reason originally in wrestling for being counted out of the ring was so that you could manipulate your finishes. If, let's say, the babyface champion finally gets the heel up in his airplane spin, and he's spinning him, but oh my gosh, they lose their balance, and then the babyface falls over and drops the heel over the top rope. Well, then the heel can't be pinned, and he's so dizzy from the finish he can't get back in the ring, so he's counted out, and the babyface wins, but he didn't win the title because the title can't change hands on a count out. Or maybe they both fall over the top rope and they're both counted out. So, God damn it, the fans didn't see that heel beaten. The babyface almost had it, but it was just a fluke. He got dizzy, whatever. The point is, if you cannot return to the ring in a set period of time, you lose the match. And Buddy Rogers made a career out of getting local babyfaces over like that without ever doing a job, because he could come up with creative ways to take creative bumps that looked accidental and could never happen again in a million years. And, and that way the people would believe it. And then they would think, well, if Rogers comes back against so-and-so next time, that's not going to happen, and my hero will beat him. But, I mean, he was so accurate with it. They said he used to be able to take bumps over the top rope and land with his foot in a bucket on purpose, just to, make it fucking weird. But again, a count out, whether in the ring or on the floor, is just another rule that you would have if professional wrestling was a legitimate sport. And that's how you can utilize those things to manipulate the finishes. Different counts on the outside are different promotions. They do it in Japan because they liked fighting in Japan and the crowd, and even back in the 70s, and Japanese people won't sue you. So that gave them more time because they still had to be halfway conscientious about the count, just like the American promotions did. You would never see in any promotion on house shows or pretty much anywhere guys in a regular match just hit the floor and be out there for minutes at a time with nobody being counted out. But the 10 count, a good referee like Tommy Young could stretch that out to 30 or 45 seconds while still counting and look like he was counting. And then they started doing the thing, and we've talked about this, it's so stupid, where both guys are out on the floor and one guy rolls in and breaks the count on everybody. And yeah, Flair used to do that sometime too, but it doesn't make any more sense then. But now it's epidemic with everybody doing it, and they hop up on the apron and then roll right back off, and suddenly that resets everything. All of this stuff was prostituted the farther along that we went, just like everything else, but originally it was grounded in realism and credibility, and that's why you could do so many things with it. But now, since nobody cares about the count out, believes in the count, and for whatever reason, just like a disqualification, Tony Khan and all the, marks think that, you can't ever count anybody out or do a DQ. That's a cheap finish. You fucking morons. Those finishes have led to some of the biggest drawing gates in the history of all professional wrestling for 100 years. But suddenly you're so smart, you don't want to do them anymore. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. So, yeah, the count out all over the place means nothing anymore. Started out legitimate like everything else.
Like most other things, I don't know how legitimate this show started out as, but I can tell you how it's going to end.
Well, yeah, you started it pretty off key.
With that, the drive-thru is closed. All right. Of course, you can hear more from Jim Cornette this weekend on the Jim Cornette Experience, wherever you find your favorite podcasts. We'll be back at you next week here on the drive-thru. Get access to the archive of the drive-thru and the Experience, patreon.com/Cornette. For $5 a month, you get access to the shows going back to 2013, patreon.com/Cornette. Don't forget to subscribe to the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Full episodes, clips of episodes, omnibus collections, all with the very, very popular and exclusive Travis Heckel artwork. Subscribe today as we approach 300,000 subscribers, the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. You can follow Jim on Twitter at the Jim Cornette. You can follow me on Twitter at Great Brian Last. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast, 605pod.com, available wherever you find your favorite podcast. Don't forget about the Feather Bottoms and Cornette's Collectibles. And there goes my fucking phone. What's going on at Cornette's Collectibles?
Well, we're not taking phone calls now because we're busy signing action figures, folks. Another 4 weeks tops. If you have an order in for an action figure, you're going to get everything that's coming to you, one way or the other. And thank you for your support.
At JimCornette.com. Don't forget the drive-thru is brought to you by the Law Office of Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. But until this weekend on The Experience, and next week right back here on the drive-thru, for Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally-ho!